Chapter 33:11. That's good. Madame Nei Hua giggled. Since we have nothing to do, we'll have to trouble the Crown Princess to play a few rounds with the ants. Very well. Sir Jojo had an indifferent expression on his face as he readily sat down on his seat. Mu Qingya shook her head with a smile. Second branch's Madame Nei Chiu and fifth branch's Madame Nei Hua quickly called out to her, "Eldest sister-in-law, let's play together for a while." "I won't play." Mu Qingya shook her head and said, "I get dizzy when I hit this." Madame Nei Chiu pursed her lips and muttered something in a low voice. Then she grabbed a nanny next to her to play with her. That old nanny played with her 3 masters and was so frightened that she felt uncomfortable all over. It was as if there were needles poking her butt, and her body kept twisting here and there. Bam! Madame Nei Hua waved her hand with a grin. The little stoic was hit by Madame Nei Hua 3 times in a row and skipped 3 rounds, but she was still expressionless. Sorry. Madame Nei Hua covered her mouth with a handkerchief and giggled. Fifth sister-in-law's luck is pretty good today. Madame Nei Chiu shot a stern look at the old nanny next to her. The other party shuddered in fright and hastily played a card that Madame Nei Chiu wanted. Madame Nei Chiu immediately received the card and heard the card in one go. She then picked another card in passing, and her eyes instantly lit up. The smile on her lips was almost unconcealable. "How all of them are right. I'm really sorry, everyone. I didn't expect to get off to a good start. It's not your turn to touch second ant yet." The little stoic reminded expressionlessly and then took the card from the stiff-faced Madame Nei Chiu's hand. "This card is mine. You can't be so shameless." Mu Qingya sat on the side and watched. When she heard this, she involuntarily coughed lightly and drank tea to hide her smile. Madame Nei Chiu was stupefied. She recalled her hand speed just now. It seemed like she stole a card. It was fine. She heard it so early, so it would definitely be her turn. A9 Lotus Lantern, thank you. 88,000 spirit coins per card. The little stoic pushed the card and extended her slender hand. What? The young Crown Prince Consort also wanted the card that she wanted. She even picked a 9 Lotus Lantern. Fuck. She only knew a little? You must be lying. Madame Hua and Madame Chiu were dumbfounded. The old nanny was so frightened that she fell off the stool. "Get up!" Madame Chiu shouted angrily. "I'll pay for your share. What are you afraid of? This is just the beginning." The next 8 rounds were like this: tubular 9 Lotus Lantern. Thank you. 88 spirit coins for each. 1,000 colored 9 Lotus Lanterns. Thank you. 88 spirit coins for each. After 13 rounds, Crown Prince Mo trod on the afterglow of the setting sun to pick up his wifey, who was playing exceedingly happily. As soon as he stepped through the gate of the Gilded Garden, he was stunned to see Madame Chiu and Madame Hua pouncing on him. They threw themselves at his feet and cried, Your Highness, quickly take your Crown Princess back." It was their fault for being so arrogant. They had thought that the little Crown Princess was young and easy to trick, so they had teamed up to trick her. Who knew what a terrible price to pay? The little Crown Princess looked at them expressionlessly and said to Kai Xiu, "Give the bill to the 2 madams." "It's the Crown Princess." Kai Xiu stifled a belly full of laughter, and the corner of her mouth kept twitching as she walked forward. She deftly handed the bill to the 2 madams who were crying miserably. Thanks to the 2 ants' care, this Crown Princess had a great time playing today. Let's play together again next time. The little Crown Princess nodded politely at the 2 of them. She stood up and pattered to her husband's side, naturally holding his hand. "Let's go home." Chapter 33:12. The 2 of them exited Gilded Garden's main gate and followed a winding stone path toward Magnolia Court. At this moment, the setting sun was shining and the wind was blowing gently. A golden-red afterglow spread over the horizon and dyed the sky red. Mo Lien secretly suppressed the smile on her lips and held Arbor's small hand as she asked, "Both madams said that you only know a little?" "I do know a little." Arbor nodded and thought for a moment before saying, "When I played with second uncle and the others in the past, they didn't like to play with me. Whoever played with you would be in for a bad time." The Crown Prince's mouth twitched as he thought to himself, He drew 13 hands and played all the 9 treasure lotus lanterns in the same color as if he was making cards. I only know this. Arbor blinked and said, I can't remember all the other ways to listen to cards. Mo Lien was speechless. This was definitely the fucking blessing of the god of cards. Otherwise, how could he make such cards? When I was in Shijio City, I rarely played a few rounds with second uncle and the others in my free time, but they always despised me. Arbor couldn't help but shake his head when he thought of this. The crown prince couldn't help but laugh. He could already imagine the sullen faces of his father-in-law and the others. Originally, playing cards was such a happy thing, but in the end, this little bastard didn't give them a chance to win at all. Most importantly, who the hell could stand the 9 treasure lotus lanterns? Arbor glanced at him. I haven't played for a long time. Later on, every time I asked my parents to play cards, they weren't too willing. They even said that I was young and that they couldn't always bully me and make me lose money. Arbor said expressionlessly, but ever since I was young, I've never lost when playing Madiao. Mo Lien couldn't help but laugh heartily. Her hearty laughter scattered over the two of them on their way back. What are you laughing at? Arbor glanced at her. Why don't we go back and exchange a few moves? Mo Lien shook his head carelessly and reached out to pick her up. He laughed and said, I admit defeat. Who would want to fight to the death with someone who was favored by the god of cards? Arbor snorted and poked his chin. You met the old prince this morning? How is he feeling? It's pretty good. Those troublemakers of the Liu family didn't succeed in the end and even suffered a hidden loss. The Lord has been in a good mood these days. Arbor nodded. That's why Anti-Emperor is so nice. Look, after a few more beatings, he immediately became obedient. Yes. My wife is right. Mo Lien held back her laughter and nodded. By the way, what gift should we prepare for the old man? Arbor's eyes lit up slightly. He tilted his head and said, I've been refining high-quality longevity pills for the past few days. What do you think of giving this to him? Mo Lien nodded. When will the finished product be ready? Probably the day after tomorrow. Arbor said, I still want to improve the quality. I'll show it to you when I'm done. Purple Vein Longevity Pill. It can increase lifespan up to 100 years. If it can reach the level of Black Vein Longevity Pill, it can increase lifespan up to 300 years. Xiozha above God level would usually spend decades in seclusion. 100 years wasn't enough for them to advance. If she only produced a purple-striped longevity pill, although it would still be very popular on the market, its effects would be of little value to Qiao Mu, who constantly strived for perfection. This kind of longevity pill was the same as the prolongation pill and longevity pill in the past. It could only be used once in a lifetime. The greater the effect, the better. Chapter 33:13. A black-veined pill. Mo Lien looked at her wife in astonishment, her eyes dancing with joy. But that's the legendary supreme-grade pill. Arbor nodded. Recently, when I was refining pills, I had a rough idea of how to do it. However, I still need some time to refine it. She wanted to refine a supreme-grade longevity pill for her grandfather. After taking such a pill, it might immediately stimulate the realm that her grandfather had maintained for several decades. Her grandfather was now an 8th-grade divine master. Who knew, he might be able to advance even further after the birthday banquet. Jojo, if old Master Mu knew that you had such intentions, he would definitely be overjoyed even if you didn't refine a black-veined pill. Mo Lien smiled and stroked the little fellow's head. Don't give yourself too much pressure. Just let nature take its course. Nothing could be forced. It was the same for refining pills and refining tools. Everything should be done according to one's heart. Forcing things too much would not be good. The little fellow blinked, then nodded his little head heavily. The two's figures disappeared into the distance under the shade of the trees. The afterglow of the sunset bathed them in the multicolored light, entangling them endlessly. When Madame Hua returned, she told her husband with a sullen face that she had lost more than 1,000,000 yuan in horse money. Mu Jingyang almost fainted from anger. You! Mu Jingyang pointed at the prodigal woman and shouted angrily, You! Second sister-in-law lost even more than me. Madame Ne Hua shrank back in trepidation and hurriedly tried to quibble. Who knew that the young crown prince consort would have such good luck? Husband, you don't know, but that crown princess actually made 13 treasures lotus lanterns. She made me and second sister-in-law lose 13 rounds of 88,000 yuan in a row. Slapped. Mu Jingyang couldn't take it anymore and slapped that stupid woman's face. That night, the second branch was also incessantly noisy. However, the little crown princess was unaware of all of this. Nighttime. The moon was bright under the starry sky, and the night was as cool as water. A plump figure sneaked in from the side door. Lifting her skirt, she was about to run into her own courtyard. Halfway there, he suddenly stopped in his tracks. The maidservant behind her couldn't stop in time and almost bumped into her back. She hurriedly lowered her voice and called out anxiously, "Miss, what are you doing? We have to hurry back to the court. If the old man finds out that you sneaked out to meet that actress again, he'll skin me alive. Go." Mu Dongni glanced sideways at the timid girl, then raised her eyebrows and looked at the figure squatting under a large willow tree not far away, digging for something. Mississippi, seeing her miss walking towards the big willow tree, the servant girl couldn't help but become even more anxious. She lowered her voice and called out, "You can't go over there, Mississippi. Sister-in-law, what are you doing here?" She exclaimed, "It's dark and you're digging in the middle of the night?" I was wondering who was squatting under the big willow tree at home. So it was sister-in-law. What kind of good stuff is it that you have to trouble sister-in-law to dig it up in the middle of the night? The figure digging under the big willow tree stiffened slightly. When she turned her head, she appropriately revealed a trace of surprise. "Dongni? Why you here? I saw that you were busy here alone, so I came up to take a look out of curiosity." Mu Dongni looked at her with a smile that wasn't a smile. "Sister-in-law, what kind of treasure are you digging for?" Chapter 33:14. 914. One pit is another pit. The one digging under the big willow tree was Madame Hua of the fifth branch. Seeing the curious expression on Mu Dongni's face, she hurriedly smiled to cover it up. "Alas, it's nothing. It's getting late. You should go back and rest." Mu Dongni's puzzled expression flashed and she giggled. "Oh, sister-in-law, aren't you treating me as an outsider? I see that you're busy here. There must be something good you're hiding from me." "Sister-in-law, why don't you tell me about it? Could it be that there's some money hidden underground?" Madame Hua's face stiffened. She hurriedly shook her head and waved her hand. "Oh, sister-in-law, don't talk nonsense. What money can there be under the ground? Alas. Let's hurry back. It's really getting late. Let's go back and rest." Seeing that she was in such a hurry to drive her away, Mu Dongni became even more suspicious. She circled around her sister-in-law and smiled maliciously. "Sister-in-law, did you steal something from home and bury it here?" Madame Hua was startled and hurriedly cried out, "Don't accuse me. How could I steal from home? I didn't steal anything. I definitely didn't steal anything." "Sister-in-law, why are you panicking?" Mu Dongni rolled her eyes and stepped forward, pushing her sister-in-law to the side. Then she squatted down and dug the soil under the willow tree. Not long after, his fingers touched an ice-cold stone box. Mu Dongni's eyes lit up and she hurriedly dug out the box. Madame Hua's eyelids twitched. Mu Dongni, however, was very fast. She casually opened it and saw a box full of spirit coins. There were at least 20 to 30,000 spirit coins inside, glittering with silver light. "Sister-in-law, you stole it, didn't you?" Mu Dongni shrieked. Of course, Madame Hua refused to admit it. She hurriedly shook her head with a pale face. No, how could I steal it? Don't talk about things you don't know. If it gets out, it will ruin my reputation." Mu Dongni looked suspicious. "You didn't steal it? Don't tell me you buried it here yourself? Why did you bury this box of spirit coins here?" Mrs. Hua wanted to say something but hesitated. After a long while, she lowered her voice and said, "Dongni, I'm telling you, don't tell anyone about this." Hearing this, Mu Dongni quickly nodded. "But, sister-in-law, go ahead." Hua looked left and right sneakily, then pulled her to the side to avoid the servant girls following behind Mu Dongni. Tony, I'm telling you, I'm planting gold. Seed gold? Mu Dongni almost laughed out loud. Sister-in-law, you must be dreaming. The greatest absurdity in the world. How could there be such a thing as planting gold? Don't tell me that if you bury 10,000 taels of gold underground, it will give you 20,000 taels of gold? Madame Hua hurriedly reached out to cover her mouth and tugged at Mu Dongni with a displeased expression. Be quiet, be quiet. I'm telling you this. Believe it if you want. Madame Hua angrily retracted her hand and snatched the stone box back from her. Mu Dongni pursed her lips and her eyes flashed. Then tell me in detail, sister-in-law. Do you see this talisman? Madame Hua took out a talisman from the bottom of the box, glanced at it in front of Mu Dongni, and then immediately put it away as if it was a treasure. Chapter 33:15. For 915 fourth star the talisman was taken back by Madame Hua, but she still carefully placed it at the bottom of the box. Madame Hua breathed a sigh of relief and then said, Let me tell you, Dongni, you have to believe it. This is an ancient golden talisman. You can definitely make a fortune out of it. It has a wide range. It can grow spirit coins, gold, silver, jade, or jewelry. I grew a set of head ornaments last time. Guess what? Mu Dongni was a little stunned. She looked at her sister-in-law with shining eyes and asked, What is it? Tell me, sister. Madame Hua lowered her voice and whispered, It grew a set of the same head ornaments for me. The luster and gloss are no different from the original head ornaments. Mu Dongni laughed and then glanced at Madame Hua. Sister-in-law, do you really think I'm stupid? You're trying to fool me. How can there be such a talisman in this world? Grow gold. Grow gold and get gold? Grow the head ornaments and get the head ornaments. Can you really grow spirit coins and get spirit coins? Madame Hua casually pushed her away and carefully buried the box of spirit coins under the willow tree again. She turned around and grabbed Madame Hua to leave. If you reveal this to anyone, I won't let you off. The next day, Mu Dongni originally wanted to meet the legendary little crown princess, but because Madame Hua revealed this secret to her, her mind was a little erratic for the whole day. She sent her personal maid Jinju to watch under the old willow tree. She didn't see her fifth sister-in-law under the willow tree for the whole day, so she couldn't help but feel a little puzzled. Could it be that her sister-in-law really didn't lie to her? In the afternoon, the young crown prince consort paid a visit to second aunt and fifth aunt's courtyard. The moment she mentioned whether or not they should continue to play horse-diao, those two fellows' faces darkened as they respectfully coaxed her away. The little crown princess pretended to be very angry and angrily went out. Midway, she made a detour to the prince's mansion. After getting used to the feeling, she went to Paradise Planet to continue refining medicine. Up until now, she had never tried to refine a black-veined top-grade pill. One could imagine how difficult it was to refine a black-veined pill. Currently, 4 of the 9 stars on her 9 stars mirroring the moon cauldron had already lit up. The cauldron fire had also changed from its original red color to a faint glazed color. The cauldron fire was extremely pure, so it would naturally be of great help to her alchemy. Now, she didn't even need to pay attention to the fire anymore. What she needed to do was to put the correct amount of medicinal herbs into the medicinal cauldron. Then, she could be a hands-off shopkeeper and let the medicinal cauldron refine on its own until the sound of the pill being formed could be heard from the medicinal cauldron. At this moment, the little girl was chatting with Little Tree. They were talking about Little Tree's report to her that he needed to find a time to go into seclusion and stabilize his realm in the middle stage of growth stage. That night, Arbor did not return to the Mu family. Instead, he casually found an excuse to stay in the Wangfu. Anyway, there were still 3 days before the old master's birthday. She could go back the day after tomorrow. When she stayed in the Mu family, even when she was in the Jade Orchid Garden, she always felt that something was staring at her. How could she dare to casually enter Paradise Planet? However, it was different in the Wangfu. She could come and go as she pleased. It just so happened that these 2 days, she was going to study the black-veined pill for the old master, so she wouldn't return to the Mu family. The time she spent on Fish Orchid Planet was 12 times longer, so she probably wouldn't have enough time to study at the Mu family. Arbor was comforting little tree, telling him to go into seclusion tomorrow without worry. Chapter 33:16. 4, 916 just one. Anyway, Xiao Shui and the others were here. Now that she was staying in Dragonflame City, what could happen? Besides, if something happened, there was still Mo Lien and Rotten Peach Blossom at the very least. He could release Mayan as a helper. The little fellow had already made up her mind. She comforted the little tree with a few words and urged it to prepare. He continued to stay beside the medicinal cauldron and began to draw talismans out of boredom. After she finished drawing dozens of flying celestial talismans, she heard a crisp sound coming from the cauldron. According to his experience, the pill was about to be completed. The little guy jumped up and ran to the side of the medicine cauldron. He patted 2 streams of spiritual energy into the medicine cauldron to help it quickly condense the pill. Not long after, a fragrant smell wafted out from the medicinal cauldron. The Venerable Peach Blossom Immortal had a keen sense of smell. He was the first to smell the soothing medicinal fragrance. He ran faster than anyone else and was the first to float to her side. What is it? What is it? Although he didn't know how to concoct pills, he was still a person with feelings. This medicinal aroma was obviously better than the previous batches of elixirs, but it was much purer. Furthermore, he felt that Jojo seemed to have made a significant breakthrough in alchemy. At this time, Xiaomu had already slapped open the medicinal cauldron, and 3 puppies dashed over from some nook and cranny. They surrounded her while barking and wagging their tails, and their beady black eyes were brimming with want emotions. Arbor looked down at the 3 puppies expressionlessly. With a light wave of his hand, several pills at the bottom of the pill cauldron flew up and were placed into a jade bottle by the little fellow. He didn't get many pills this time. Only 7. One was a black vein longevity pill, while the other 6 were all purple vein pills. But what made her feel a little excited was that the black striped longevity pill had actually broken through the level of an earth grade pill, directly leaping to the divine grade. That's right, this was a divine grade longevity pill. The Venerable Peach Blossom Immortal circled around her and said anxiously, "Jojo, quickly show it to me." "What is it again?" "I'll show you. You can't swallow it," Arbor said expressionlessly. The Venerable Peach Blossom Immortal blinked and asked pitifully, "I can't eat it?" "Arbor, it doesn't work on you." Arbor looked at him speechlessly. "But it looks delicious," the Venerable Peach Blossom Immortal muttered to himself. "If the longevity fruit is born, you'll be the first to eat it," Arbor said helplessly. "When will there be results?" The Venerable Peach Blossom Immortal looked at her pitifully. Arbor said with a stoic face, "Soon. Once Paradise Planet rises to the God Domain, it will definitely succeed." The Venerable Peach Blossom Immortal widened his eyes slightly and immediately lowered his head dejectedly. He still had to wait until he reached the divine realm. How long would that take? Oh no, he had to have faith in the little girl. In the hands of this little girl, anything that was impossible was extremely possible. Thinking of this, the Venerable Peach Blossom Immortal nodded reluctantly. "All right, let me take a look." The little girl handed over the jade bottle to him. The Venerable Peach Blossom Immortal opened the bottle and looked at the light golden round pill inside. The black vein on the pill was very obvious. The Venerable Peach Blossom Immortal was slightly shocked and turned to look at her with some joy. "Jojo, did you refine a black vein pill?" "Just one." The little girl pursed her lips. "I'm not familiar with it yet. I estimate that I can only refine 1 out of 100 pills." Chapter 33:17. That's not bad either. This was a supreme grade pill with black veins. Let alone 1 in 100 pills. The pill alchemists outside probably couldn't produce 1 in 10,000 pills. Arbor nodded upon hearing this. "That's true." The Venerable Peach Blossom Immortal returned the bottle to the little stoic with great difficulty. The little stoic's lips involuntarily twitched at his grief-stricken expression. She then consoled him, "If I become proficient in refining next time, I'll refine it for you like candy." The Venerable Peach Blossom Immortal's eyes brightened abruptly when he heard this, and he stretched out his arms to carry the little stoic. "Stoic face, then I'll rely on you. Refine it well and quickly become proficient." Do you really think supreme-grade pills with black veins can be refined like candy? She was just consoling him. She didn't expect this guy to have such great confidence in her. When Arbor saw him randomly carrying her over, he immediately flashed out of Paradise Planet with the pill. The moment he came out, he heard the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal shout, Jojo, quickly come in. Arbor didn't understand what was going on. Before he could react, he heard a clap of thunder coming from the roof. The roof was broken open with a boom, and lightning struck down at him. Fuck, what was going on? What kind of heavenly wrath did he incur that a sudden bolt of lightning would strike him? He hadn't reached the 5 spirits reincarnation tribulation yet, so what was there to strike him for? The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal flashed to his side and said with a helpless smile, I forgot to tell you. A heaven-defying existence like a divine rank black veins pill will definitely be struck by lightning. Arbor. Why didn't you say so earlier? Looking at the rolling thunder, Arbor flew out of the hole in the roof with a whoosh. At this time, the king consort, who had been alarmed by the thunder, was rushing over here with a group of people in a panic. Arbor only had time to throw down a sentence. Don't chase after me. Stop, Imperial Ant. He flew far away with a whoosh. At the same time at the Mu estate, Hua Shi, who was digging for a stone box under the large willow tree, was suddenly startled by a sudden clap of thunder. Her hands involuntarily trembled as she held the stone box. Looking up, the entire horizon was illuminated in a snow-white color. I've really seen a ghost. She couldn't help but mutter, feeling a little guilty. Sister-in-law. Mu Dongni cried out, startling Madame Hua again. Her hands trembled and she almost dropped the box. What's the matter? Hua Shi coughed. Hurry up and open the box, Mu Dongni urged. Madame Hua glanced at her and snorted. You don't believe me, so why are you here? Why don't you show me? Hua Shi sneered and opened the stone box. Mu Dongni stared blankly as a large pile of spirit coins fell out of the box. Oh my god. These spirit coins were at least twice as much as what he saw last night. Hua Shi happily took out the golden talisman and kowtowed to it. She muttered a few words and bit her finger to feed the talisman paper. Only then did she put the golden talisman back into the box and buried the box in the ground again. You're not taking it away? Mu Dongni was surprised. Why should I take it away? Hua Shi looked at her as if she was an idiot. Isn't it good to bury it here to make more money? Mu Dongni nodded suspiciously. The next day, Mu Dongni asked Zhang Ju to closely monitor the movements of the 5th branch. She also went to the old willow tree several times to check, but didn't see anything unusual with 5th sister-in-law. In the evening, Mu Dongni appeared under the willow tree as scheduled. Seeing Hua Shi dig out more spirit coins than yesterday, she completely believed her. Chapter 33:18. Hey, 5th sister-in-law, how about I join you? Mu Dongni looked at Madame Hua with bright eyes and smiled at her ingratiatingly. 5th sister-in-law, please agree with me. She thought happily that if the spirit coins in her hand could increase endlessly, it would be no problem to support her lover. She wouldn't have to beg for money from old master. Madame Hua glanced at her and shook her head. That won't do. You didn't agree when I asked you to join us. Now that you see the effect, you want to join us. How can there be such a good thing in the world? Madame Hua snorted. I took the risk for a long time the first 2 times. Mu Dongni smiled obsequiously. Sister-in-law, I'll give you some commission. I have 1,000,000 spirit coins here. Help me plant it. By the way, can the 1,000,000 spirit coins be doubled? Why are you here if you don't believe me? Madame Hua pushed her hand away angrily. Let me tell you, the doubled amount of this kind of golden talisman can't exceed 5,000,000 spirit coins at most. If I give you 1,000,000 spirit coins quota, won't I have less for myself? Aya, sister-in-law, aren't we family? Just plant it for me, just plant it for me. Mu Dongni continued to coax and pester for a long time. She said that she would give Madame Hua half the commission, and then she said that if Madame Hua didn't help her, she would tell others that Madame Hua had a golden talisman. Madame Hua had no choice but to agree after being threatened and tempted by her. Taking advantage of the fact that no one was around, the 2 of them buried their money in the ground. After confirming it again and again, Mu Dongni walked away, full of hope. Great, by tomorrow, she could earn 2 million spirit coins. The day after tomorrow, it would be 4 million. And the day after that, Thinking of this, she couldn't help laughing out loud. In the future, she wouldn't have to worry about money to support her lover. Maybe she could support a few more. Who said that a widowed woman would have a hard time? She would still have to live her life happily and happily. The next afternoon. Boom. The flashes of lightning in the sky alarmed everyone in Dragonflame City. Damn it, these 2 days, the thunder tribulations fell on Dragonflame City quite frequently. Prince Mo had just finished his discussion with the Emperor. As soon as he walked out of the Imperial Study, he saw that somewhere in the southeast of the Imperial City, dark clouds were rolling. From the looks of it, it really seemed like someone was undergoing the 5 spirits reincarnation tribulation. Yo, the sky is clear, why is there thunder again? The lightning from 2 days ago had come in a strange manner and disappeared quickly as well. When some people went to check it out, they couldn't find anything. They only saw a hole in the outskirts. Mo Lien glanced at the sky and prepared to leave the palace to find his wife. However, this lightning strike that seemed to be the 5 spirits reincarnation tribulation attracted the attention of many people. All the idol practitioners in the city, those who had some strength, rushed towards that place. Some were checking, some were probing, and each of them had their own ulterior motives. Arbor planned to go back to the Mu family today, but she had to wait for her husband's carriage to pick her up, and then the 2 of them would go back together. Before leaving, the Emperor's aunt prepared a lot of delicious food for her to eat on the way back. Arbor touched her little belly. It was round and didn't seem to be hungry at all. As soon as she walked out of the gate of the prince's mansion, her attention was attracted by the tribulation clouds in the sky. Today's tribulation clouds looked much thicker than the ones she experienced the day before. Chapter 33:19. From the looks of it, she really looked like she wanted to strike someone to death. Rumble. Lu Iren, who was gorgeously dressed as she walked over from the street entrance with her servants, jumped in fright at the sound of thunder. When she looked up and saw Arbor standing at the entrance, her eyes lit up and she couldn't help but curse, "Bad luck," in a low voice. Greetings to the Crown Princess. Lu Iren learned her lesson. She thought that if she didn't greet this stoic-faced Crown Princess, she would be nagged by the Princess Consort again in the future, saying that she didn't know etiquette and so on. Humph, wasn't it just a bit of empty courtesy? Who didn't know how to act? Lu Iren squatted there with her maidservant for a minute or two, but when she didn't hear Arbor's voice, she couldn't help but gnash her teeth in anger. She raised her head slightly to look at her with an impatient expression. She was purposely giving her the cold shoulder, right? Yet she saw that the little Crown Princess was looking up at the sky, her attention focused on the tribulation clouds in the horizon, as if she didn't notice her at all. Lu Iren couldn't help but pinch the handkerchief in her hand and gnash her teeth in anger. Greetings to the Crown Princess. Lu Iren stifled a mouthful of turbid air and practically yelled out loud. After she yelled out, she heard an indifferent voice enter her ears from behind. Miss Lu doesn't know how to greet people with courtesy, so continue squatting here for 2 hours and learn properly. Lu Iren trembled all over and turned her head to look. She saw the Crown Prince, who was dressed in formal court attire and had a posture as tall and straight as jade, slowly walking down from the carriage. At this moment he was sweeping his cold gaze over her. Lu Iren's heart became increasingly uneasy, and she hurriedly stuttered, Greetings to your Highness the Crown Prince. Lily girl, born in the countryside, has a rather loud voice. I didn't mean to speak loudly like this. After she finished speaking, she wished for nothing more than to slap herself in the face. In order to gloss over this matter, she actually slandered her own image in front of His Highness the Crown Prince. She was about to cry from her own stupidity. However, Crown Prince Mo simply ignored her. Whether Lu Iren's image was ruined or not, it had nothing to do with him. The little Crown Princess also regained her senses at this moment. She leaped towards him and tugged at his sleeve, saying in a crisp voice, Yen, look at the horizon. Is someone going through the 5 spirits reincarnation tribulation? I'm going to advance to the divine realm. Mo Yen nodded hesitantly. It does look like it, but I'm not too sure. Then should we go over and have a look? The little fellow's eyes twinkled as if she was watching a good show. Mo Lien couldn't help but laugh. If you want to go, then let's go. Anyway, she was going back to the Mu family now. It was still early, just past noon. It was fine to go and see what was going on. What's the southeast direction? Looking at the direction, it should be near Fong Hua Temple in the southeastern suburbs of the city. Mo Lien held her small hand and said, "Let's go." The two of them boarded the carriage. The coachman rode on a spirit horse that moved at an extremely fast speed, rushing towards Fong Hua Temple. Before they even reached the place, they heard a clamor coming from afar. Mo Lien had the coachman stop the carriage by the roadside. Holding his wife's hand, he got off the carriage and looked towards the sky above Fong Hua Temple not far away. They saw a white figure floating in the air. Wisps of lightning circled around her body, causing her entire body to be enveloped in a faint purplish-blue light. It was a female cultivator undergoing the 5 spirits reincarnation tribulation. Arbor looked up at that slightly frail figure. Chapter 33:20. Actually, she didn't know this woman. She heard that when female cultivators went through the 5 spirits reincarnation, they had a much higher failure rate than male cultivators. She just didn't know if the one in front of her would. Just as he was lost in thought, a bolt of lightning struck the female cultivator from the sky, knocking her down several feet. The female cultivator barely held her breath and hung in the air. However, in less than a second, she spat out a mouthful of blood. Boos immediately sounded from all around. There were 200 to 300 cultivators watching, men and women of all ages. However, the expressions on the faces of the female cultivators didn't look too good. This female cultivator, who was at the peak of level 15 Great Spiritual Master, was also a little famous in Dragon Flame City. Everyone felt that the arrival of her 5 spirits reincarnation was a matter of course, After all, this person had been at the peak of level 15 Great Spiritual Master for a full 40 years. It was only a matter of time before she could become a god-level cultivator. Now, the 5 spirits reincarnation had indeed come, but this powerful Great Spiritual Master in their eyes was so weak at the moment, as if she would be struck by lightning in the next second. Arbor couldn't help but break out in cold sweat for her. That old thing Heavenly Tao is up to no good again, right? It used to be so mean to my master. It didn't let my master talk to me more and threw her back. Mo Lien was a little speechless. What could he say? He wanted to say that the 5 spirits reincarnation test for female cultivators on the Divine Land was indeed very rare. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was 1 in 10,000. But he always felt that as long as he dared to say it, the little emperor would definitely dare to rebuke him. It was better not to say it. Mo Lien lowered his head to look at his wife. Seeing the little fellow's little face tense up, as if the little unhappy mood was rising, he hurriedly said, "Jojo, this everyone has their own luck and fate. We can't force it. But Heavenly Tao doesn't treat everyone equally. It's too harsh on us women. Why could male cultivators pass the 5 spirits reincarnation smoothly, but female cultivators had such a hard time even passing the lightning tribulation? But then again, the lightning tribulation that struck her the day before didn't seem to have any power at all. After a couple of weak and crooked strikes, it disappeared without a trace, as if it was just a casual strike. What kind of logic was this? Actually, the most terrifying thing isn't the lightning tribulation. The 5 spirits reincarnation requires one to pass through the trials of wood, thunder, water, fire, and earth. The hardest one is the fire tribulation, or even the thunder tribulation. The might of the heavenly fire is unparalleled. If we're unlucky, the lightning and fire will strike at the same time. Mo Lien didn't say anything, but the little girl's face turned even uglier. She faintly saw a trace of red light on the horizon. Could this be the great tribulation of thunder and fire that Mo Lien had mentioned? Arbor looked up at Mo Lien. The latter looked at her innocently. Naturally, he felt a little embarrassed in his heart. He didn't expect his crow's mouth to be so clever. He had just mentioned the thunder-fire tribulation, and the thunder-fire tribulation had already arrived. What a pity. I'm afraid Sister How will die here today. The thunder fire tribulation is already here. My God, what should we do? Sister Hao's defensive spirit artifact has already been broken. What will happen if she can't withstand this thunder fire tribulation? The little fellow couldn't help but shout. Mo Lien hugged her and said helplessly, Jojo, you know. Chapter 33:21. If you can't pass the 5-spirit reincarnation cycle, you'll be reduced to ashes. Sir Jojo shook his small body and then said, Hey, catch. When the crowd heard this crisp cry, they couldn't help but be stunned. Their gazes all turned toward the source of the sound. Mo Lien and Arbor were standing at the side of the empty space outside Feng Hua Temple. Beside them, 4 spirit horses were leisurely nibbling on the green grass at the side. The 2 of them were handsome, and their eyebrows were very delicate. At first glance, one would think that they were elegant people who had walked out of a painting. Before they could recover from their shock, they saw 3 shining defensive spiritual weapons flying towards them and landing in Sister Hao's hands. Sister Hao, who looked a little defeated, was startled. She turned to look at Arbor. However, she was in the middle of her tribulation and didn't have time to say anything to Arbor. A flame landed on her body with a whoosh and enveloped her whole body. As if it wanted to burn her to ashes, the flames emitted crackling sounds. Arbor waved his small arms and legs but was stopped by Mo Lien. Jojo, if you help her like this, you'll be implicated later. At that time, he would really be inviting trouble. She dares. Arbor snorted and then rummaged through his inner world. That Mu Jingfeng fellow didn't even know to bring some good defensive spirit tools. They're all just making up the numbers. The one she threw to Sister Hao just now was the one she picked out from the compensation Mu Jingfeng offered. It was a pity that it was just an ordinary defensive spirit tool. Its power was really a little weak. Jojo. Mo Lien had a helpless expression. Sir Jojo wrinkled his nose angrily. Why does a woman's tribulation have to be reduced to ashes at the slightest provocation? The success rate is only 1/10,000th of you men's? Since I've encountered her, I must ensure that she passes the tribulation safely, the little fellow said with an unconvinced expression. Mo Lien instantly felt even more helpless. Wife, you don't even know her. Why are you joining in the fun? I don't know her, but I still want to save her. Jojo said stubbornly, I don't care. The heavenly Tao is truly vicious. By doing this, it's clearly discriminating against us women. I can't let it succeed. Mo Lien, his wife was always at odds with the heavenly Tao. What should he do? Arbor glanced at him. Are you secretly nagging Jojo in your heart, saying that Jojo is not obedient? Mo Lien couldn't help but laugh. She raised her hand and stroked her little head. Do whatever you want. However, these defensive spirit tools won't be able to save anyone. What this female cultivator needs are magical treasures. Something like the soul-gathering bell. Soul-gathering bell? Arbor blinked. She was very clear that the magic treasure Mo Lien was talking about was completely different from the magic treasure that ordinary people talked about. In the eyes of ordinary people, perhaps profound armaments could be called magic treasures. However, the magic treasure that Mo Lien was talking about, like the soul-gathering bell, must be an item that was at least a 10th grade divine artifact. It would be best if it was a treasure that was naturally formed in heaven and earth. For example, the sun-moon wheels? If she had the sun-moon wheels, then this tribulation would be a piece of cake. Arbor calculated in her heart. Suddenly, she summoned the 9 stars mirroring the moon cauldron from her conscious. Her eyes flashed. Go. I'll lend it to you. Mo Lien couldn't help but twitch the corner of his mouth. If he was the heavenly Tao, he would definitely chop this little troublemaker into pieces first. Fine. The 9 stars mirroring the moon cauldron was a divine artifact. Its defensive level was even higher than divine artifacts. Chapter 33:22. Naturally, the 9 stars mirroring the moon cauldron was much more effective than the soul congregation bell. The little fellow had actually lent it to her. All right, looks like he's determined to save this female cultivator's life. At the same time, the 9 stars mirroring the moon cauldron transformed into an enormous cauldron that swiftly enveloped the female cultivator. At the same time, the terrifying tribulation of lightning and fire descended in a mighty manner. Everyone felt an expanse of violet light and crimson-red light revolve before their eyes, and it was like a 3,000 m tall waterfall that flowed down. The lightning and fire condensed into a waterfall that instantly smashed onto the 9 stars mirroring the moon cauldron. An enormous shaking bang sounded out by their ears as the endless lightning and fire followed along the tribulation clouds in the sky and meandered down. Rumble! All of them smashed onto the 9 stars mirroring the moon cauldron. For stars swiftly lit up on the 9 stars mirroring the moon cauldron, and it was even to the extent that the little fellow's sharp eyes suddenly noticed that the 9 stars mirroring the moon cauldron was surrounded by a glazed luster as if it was sucking in large mouthfuls of the energy of lightning and fire, and it was so comfortable that it wished for nothing more than to dance with joy. Such a saint artifact naturally had a spirit. Although this artifact spirit was still extremely weak, the joy it conveyed to Arbor caused Arbor to instantly realize that this 9 stars mirroring the moon cauldron was actually able to absorb the energy of the 5 spirits of heaven and earth. Moreover, Miss Chiao was simply stunned when she saw the 5th star on the cauldron swiftly light up. So my stubbornness in wanting to save her actually allowed the tiny cauldron to obtain benefits. Sure enough, kindness was rewarded. Lord Jojo instantly felt a sense of satisfaction. This was truly a pleasant surprise. At this moment, the exhausted Hao Fei couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief. She was enveloped beneath the 9 stars mirroring the moon cauldron, and she was able to clearly sense that all the lightning and fire that descended from the sky were all blocked by this cauldron. She didn't dare think too much and hurriedly sat down cross-legged before withdrawing a spirit pill from her inner world with trembling hands and swallowing it. After that, she hurriedly made the best use of her time to close her eyes and cultivate as she wanted to make the best use of her time to recover some strength. For the sake of this 5 spirits reincarnation tribulation, she'd actually been searching for defensive spirit artifacts and various types of spirit artifacts to protect herself since 1.5 years ago. Furthermore, she had already discussed this with the abbot of Fanghua Temple and requested the monks of the temple to protect her and strengthen her defense. However, even if he was fully prepared, he could not resist the destructive pressure of the heavenly Tao. She had gone through the wood, water, earth, and lightning tribulations. Actually, by the time she reached the lightning tribulation, she was already completely exhausted and felt that she might die at any moment. Therefore, she gritted her teeth and persevered. Finally, the lightning tribulation came to an end. Now, all she had to do was endure the fire tribulation. However, what made her despair was that the great tribulation of lightning and fire had arrived. Lightning and fire tribulations were truly rare. When the 3,000 male Xiozha went through the 5 spirits reincarnation tribulation, not even one of them would encounter the tribulation of thunder and fire. However, Hao Fei, had encountered it just like that. He had to admit that his luck was pretty good. Just when she thought she was about to die, a little girl actually helped her. The 3 defensive spirit tools that the little girl threw at her were already good enough. She calculated that they might be able to resist for a while, so she had to make the best use of the time to recover. But to his surprise, the little girl threw another cauldron at him. This would be a huge help to her. The Divine Continent's 5 spirits reincarnation tribulation's harsh rules for female Xiozha made me suffer a lot in the past. Peony stood beside the 2 of them at an unknown time. Chapter 33-23. She reflexively wiped her tears and said, "Jojo, it would have been great if sister had met you back then. You would have definitely helped me, okay?" Sir Jojo nodded vigorously. The peony fairy couldn't help but burst with joy. The more she looked at this little fellow, the cuter she became. She wanted to snatch Imo Lien for a hug. Crown Prince, you're too stingy. Can't you just let me hug the little stoic? Scram. Prince Imo rolled his eyes at her rudely, alarm bells ringing in his heart. What was going on? He kept feeling that not only did Rotten Peach Blossoms want to snatch his wife, but they also wanted to snatch women from him. At this time, The 3 thunderbolts that bombarded the 9 stars mirroring the moon cauldron were thoroughly enraged. What was going on? Why was this woman hiding in her turtle shell and not coming out? The thunderbolts in the sky instantly turned around and aimed at Sir Jojo. The peony fairy, who was quarreling with Emolien, abruptly changed her expression. Oh no, that old geezer, Heavenly Law, is going to attack Jojo. Let it come. Sir Jojo wasn't scared. Arbor bounced on the spot, and in the next second, she covered herself with an eggshell defensive barrier. Then her whole body emitted a multicolored light, covering her head, wrists, legs, waist, chest, back, and neck. She activated all the defensive spirit tools that could be activated. Everyone was flabbergasted as they stared dumbfoundedly at this female nouveau riche. She really was nouveau riche. If she didn't activate her defensive spirit tools, you simply wouldn't know that the hairpin on her head was also a defensive spirit tool. Emolien twitched her mouth, unable to bear to look straight at her. Jojo, you're not a coward, huh? Only then did she shout at Heavenly Law and activate all the defensive spirit tools on her body in the next second. Arbor expressionlessly glanced at everyone and stretched out her small hand, beckoning to the thunderbolts in the sky. Come on. Paradise Planet, the beasts that were watching couldn't help covering their eyes in unison. Master, don't you feel like you're courting death? The little water child muttered weakly. You're finished. You said that Master was courting death. The little water kid hurriedly rushed over and covered the little dirt lump's mouth. Even though the dirt lump had transformed into a human, it still looked like a black dirt lump, and its little face was full of bumps and hollows. The Heavenly Tao was truly infuriated by Arbor. The lightning and fire circled in the sky and was about to rush in her direction. Xiao Mu was on high alert, waiting for this bolt of lightning to descend upon her. However, not at all. Halfway through, the lightning fire bounced back crazily. It had been forcefully twisted in an extremely awkward direction, and it continued to smash into the 9 stars mirroring the moon cauldron. Everyone was dumbfounded. They looked at each other, and their eyes were filled with confusion. Could it be that their eyes were playing tricks on them? Wasn't the lightning fire tribulation supposed to teach the little girl a lesson? Why did it suddenly shrink back? Arbor expressionlessly looked at the lightning fire that had shrunk back and continued to strike Hao Fei with all its might. This fellow seemed to want to vent all its resentment and anger on Hao Fei. Unfortunately, Hao Fei was also hiding in the 9 stars mirroring the moon cauldron. It couldn't burn or strike her at all. The lightning fire churned violently between heaven and earth, showing more and more signs of going berserk. Hao Fei quickly adjusted herself, then immediately crawled out of the 9 stars mirroring the moon cauldron and laughed at Arbor heroically. Little girl, thank you. Chapter 33-24. When the Thunder Fire saw that the main character had come out, it immediately did not hold back. It circled and formed a ball of thunder fire, like a pillar of fire to the sky, falling from the sky. With the terrible power of thunder and destroying all things, it swooped straight toward Hao Fei's head. Hao Fei used all her strength to open all the defensive spiritual weapons on her body, followed by a layer of divine power to set up a thick defensive boundary in front of her to resist the thunder fire. At this time, the spiritual power rolling around her body blew up her robe and belt. Hao Fei's white clothes fluttered, hanging above the main courtyard of Fanghua Temple. Her whole person seemed to be shrouded in a layer of light and shadow. She was so beautiful that a group of onlookers was a little stunned. Hao Fei originally had a sweet appearance. She was almost 100 years old, but she did not look old at all. She looked like a beautiful woman in her 30s. At this time, she, who was going through the 5 spirits reincarnation tribulation, in the eyes of everyone, had a little bit of firmness with a touch of gentleness. Everything happened in the blink of an eye. The bolt of lightning and fire in the sky smashed into the defensive barrier that Hao Fei had erected with a loud bang. Arbor saw with his own eyes that on Hao Fei's outer defensive boundary, there were cobweb-like cracks, which were spreading to the surroundings inch by inch. In just a moment, it was severely shattered. Ha ha! Hao Fei laughed wildly. A trace of cold light flashed in her eyes. She held a metal-heavy sword that she had specially found someone to make with both hands to support her swaying body. Who said that the success rate of the 5 spirits reincarnation tribulation is only 1 in 10,000 for us female practitioners? Today I, Hao Fei, will prove to the whole divine prefecture that we women are not inferior to men. Before, when no one helped her, although she desperately thought that she might die, she still held on to her last breath and fought against the evil heavens no matter what. She would fight until she had only half a breath left. She would never admit defeat. Now that even a little girl she had never met before was willing to help her, what was there to be afraid of? She was not holding on alone. All the onlookers, no matter men or women, could not help but feel a trace of admiration in their hearts. Some female rogue practitioners could not help but excitedly raise their arms and shout, "Sister Hao, good job! Sister Hao, we believe that you can get through this hurdle. Sister Hao, Sister Hao." The rolling thunder and fire hovered angrily in the air for a long time. Then, it saw a gap and suddenly turned into a purple and red fire dragon. It roared and bared its fangs and claws as it rushed towards Hao Fei. At this moment, everyone's hearts leaped to their throats. Even the male cultivators who were enjoying the show couldn't help but feel their hearts skip a beat. It was desperate. The lightning fire had taken form. For hundreds of years, no one had ever seen such a scene of a dragon charging straight ahead and being struck by lightning or fire. Who would be able to block such a bolt of heaven's wrath? Sister Hao! Several female cultivators who were close to Hao Fei couldn't help but cry with tears in their eyes. Hao Fei, his soul and body were about to be destroyed. Hao Fei laughed heartily, facing the impending death with a calm face. "What you destroyed was only my body. But it will never destroy the hearts of us women. You've gone too far." Arbor roared and pointed at the sky. Prince Mo's expression changed. He didn't even have time to grab his little wife before he saw the little thing shoot out with a whoosh. Chapter 33:25. An extremely fast figure streaked across the sky like lightning and instantly appeared in front of Hao Fei. Raising her small fist, Miss Chiao's face was filled with anger. The heavenly Tao was obviously taking revenge. Who could go through the 5 spirits reincarnation test and still face the once-in-a-century lightning fire transformation? How could the pitiful female cultivator in front of her block such a fierce lightning fire dragon? The heavenly Tao, this old thing, even if it had the intention of destroying this female cultivator and wanted to kill her. Everyone was shocked and took a few steps back. Everyone knew that when others were going through the 5 spirits reincarnation tribulation, they could indeed ask others to help them from the periphery. But if they really interfered in the tribulation of others and blocked the lightning and fire for others, the person who was going through the tribulation next might be even more unlucky. Only Mo Lien was really frightened and hurriedly rushed to the little fellow's side. Under everyone's watchful eyes, the lightning fire that had transformed into a dragon directly grabbed at Hao Fei's head. Hao Fei was also shocked and subconsciously wanted to push Arbor away. However, right at this moment, everyone was once again dumbfounded to discover that the lightning fire of heaven and earth that was baring its fangs and brandishing its claws above Hao Fei and Arbor's heads, its dragon whiskers could almost touch Arbor's little face at a close distance. As if constipated, its body brushed past the 2 people's heads and rushed over with a whistling sound. The dragon shape also gradually dissipated. There was complete silence. Everyone couldn't help but reveal an expression as if they had seen a ghost. Just now, the lightning fire seemed to have gone crazy and didn't attack the little girl. It even changed its path very unnaturally midway, which already made everyone feel that it was a little ridiculous. But most people felt that their eyes were playing tricks on them. The lightning fire could still choose to attack people? That was impossible. But now, they saw it very clearly. The lightning fire really selectively avoided the little girl. Because the little girl rushed in front of Hao Fei without any reason, in order to avoid her, the lightning fire could only reluctantly disperse along with the dragon's momentum that it had accumulated to a large extent. At this moment, Hao Fei's body erupted with a brilliant light. She felt as if her entire body was bathed in holy light. The pores on her body seemed to have opened up, and the pain from her injuries was slowly being healed by this dense light. He has advanced. I've successfully advanced. Everyone looked at the virtual 5 spirits roulette disc rising from Hao Fei's feet and couldn't help but exclaim in unison. On the 5 spirit wheel, there was only one flame that was transparent and slowly burning. This meant that Hao Fei was originally a fire spirit master, and now all of her spiritual energy was undergoing a rapid transformation within her body. The spiritual ruin realm was also advancing towards the divine ruin realm. Hao Fei had really succeeded in advancing. Arbor's eyes slightly brightened. At this time, he didn't notice that the cluster of thunder fire was angrily wagging its tail and running away. The 5-spirit roulette disc finally disappeared from under Hao Fei's feet. What replaced it was a bright and dancing flame that swayed under her feet and then disappeared. The brilliance on Hao Fei's body slowly faded. Her pair of eyes slowly opened. Her eyes emitted an incomparable self-confidence and infinite gratitude towards the little girl when she turned around. Those female practitioners who were on good terms with Hao Fei couldn't help but cheer. Chapter 33-26. Sister Hao. Sister Hao, you succeeded, Sister Hao. You've really succeeded. The female cultivators surrounded Hao Fei and cheered. They were so excited that it was as if they themselves had advanced. The eyes of these female cultivators were slightly moist. It was the realization of life and death. They also felt proud and moved for their sister Hao. They felt that Hao Fei's success meant that these female cultivators who worked hard to cultivate had a glimmer of hope and hope. Sister Hao had worked so hard and succeeded in breaking through. Perhaps they should not continue to muddle through their days. In life, one had to dare to fight and fight. Only in this way could one say that one's life was not in vain at the end. Hao Fei was not as optimistic as them. She knew very well that if it were not for the little girl's help, perhaps she would have already died here. There were many people in the crowd who silently memorized the young crown princess's face. They hurriedly returned and sent people from their families to inquire about who this girl was in the imperial capital. These people were all very excited. Today's scene made them deeply discover a strange but very legendary thing. This little girl could really rebuke the heavenly Tao. It was true. It was not good luck, nor was it some dog shit luck. The little girl had rebuked the heavenly Tao twice, and the thunder fire did not dare to attack her. It should be said that the thunder fire would go far away when it saw her, so, from this, it could be inferred that if they asked the little girl to escort them when they were going through their tribulations in the future. These people were inexplicably greedy and excited at the same time. They all set their sights on the little girl. Hao Fei turned around and was shocked. Where's the girl? She didn't even have time to thank that girl properly and have a proper conversation with her. Such a great kindness naturally could not be repaid with money. She made an impromptu decision in her heart. But when she looked back, the little girl had already left at some point. Just now, there were too many people and a group of people came to congratulate her. She really could not turn around. Now that the little girl had disappeared, she could not help but become anxious. If she did not repay this great kindness, how could she be human? Sister Hao, don't be anxious. Look at that girl's clothes from Nikhang Market. She must be a rich and noble person. We will send people to ask around now. The little girl's current situation was not good. After Hao Fei was surrounded by a group of people, Sir Jojo was packed up and thrown into the carriage by Prince Mo. On the way back, Prince Mo's handsome face was tense, and his entire body was emitting a single word, Chi. The little girl obediently sat in the corner of the carriage. She lowered her head and looked at her 2 little fingers. Xiao Qiao's lotus was angry, and very angry. Now that she had calmed down and recalled what she had done, she immediately blushed with shame. Just now, when the thunder fire had transformed, she had rushed forward as if she was seeking death, blocking the thunder fire for a stranger. It was not that she was a righteous person, but at that moment, this little fellow was inexplicably certain that the lightning fire would not dare to land on her. As it turned out, her guess was right. Therefore, she wouldn't do anything stupid that she wasn't confident in. But Jojo's lotus didn't know that the situation at that time was so dangerous. When the thunder and fire came crashing down, they might not even have a corpse left. Lien was worried because of her instinctive fear. Chapter 33:27. So, actually, she should explain it to her husband now, right? Arbor stole a glance at her husband and nimbly crawled 2 steps towards him. She placed her hands on her knees and knelt obediently for a while. She saw the man pursing his thin lips and sitting there with his head tilted to the side. He was calmly pouring tea, and his gaze never once looked in her direction. Lord Jojo hurriedly sneaked a few steps towards him and knelt obediently again. Only a glimmer of light peeked out from the corner of his eyes as he glanced at him. No reaction. Arbor stuck out a little finger and secretly poked his arm. Still no reaction. What should she do? The atmosphere was now a little awkward. Arbor did not give up and reached over again to tug at his sleeve. Seeing that he was still ignoring her, she hurriedly tugged at it a few more times. Rip. Arbor looked at the half piece of cloth in her hand and looked at him with a slightly speechless expression. She said dryly, This cloth is not very good. She did not use much strength. How did it tear? Mo Lien abruptly turned his head, glaring at her with his phoenix eyes that contained a bit of anger. He grabbed her little chin with one hand and said in a low voice, Do you know how dangerous it was just now? You dared to take such a risk just to save a stranger? The moment you rushed out, did you think about me? The little fellow was shocked and hurriedly rushed over to hug him. She said in a small voice, I think nothing will happen. Really nothing will happen? Mo Lien narrowed his phoenix eyes. His eyes seemed to be filled with a violent storm in an instant. If you lose a single strand of hair, guess what will happen to that person today? His voice was cold and heavy. Arbor saw that something was wrong. Her husband was boiling with anger today. In the past 10 years, in the past 7 or 8 years, he was only this angry when she disappeared to Paradise Planet and reappeared. Arbor thought about it and felt that she was indeed a little wrong. She said in a small voice, I am really confident. You see, the lightning fire did not even dare to hit me before. Mo Lien's eyes flashed with anger. Stop talking. Just because the lightning fire didn't dare to strike you once before, you think it won't dare to strike you again? Expansion. That was the heavenly Tao. This little guy was really too bold. He closed in on her. He was only inches away from her, but she could clearly see the anger in his eyes. The little guy swallowed his saliva and felt that the situation was a little serious, but he still answered obediently, I feel that it doesn't dare to hit me every time. I just don't dare to. Mo Lien gazed at her deeply before asking in a low voice, Guess what I would do if something really happened to you? Although his voice was light, it felt a little heavy. In the depths of those dark eyes, there seemed to be 2 deep whirlpools spinning rapidly, and a terrifying restlessness raged in the depths of those eyes. Arbor felt his heart tremble slightly. His big eyes looked around, but he didn't dare to look at him. Jojo's Lotus looked a little scared now the carriage stopped in front of the Mu estate. Mo Lien's handsome face was gloomy. He grabbed Arbor's little hand and dragged her out of the carriage. His 5 fingers tightly clasped her little hand, holding it tightly and tightly. His hand was like a furnace. Sir Jojo's palm was a little sweaty from the warmth of his hand, but she didn't dare to throw his hand away. Chapter 33:28. She wasn't a fool. If she were to add fuel to the fire now, wouldn't she be angering this man even more? The 2 guards at the door hurriedly stepped forward and respectfully greeted, Your Highness the Crown Prince. Following that, they were shocked by the Crown Prince's cold gaze. His Highness's gaze was filled with murderous intent, as if he wanted to lash out at the heavens and the earth. The 2 guards were so frightened that they trembled all over. How would they dare to speak? They retreated several steps and stood to the side with their heads lowered. Mo Lien held Arbor's small hand and strode towards Jade Orchid Court. Sir Jojo's steps were small, so he could only run after him. As they ran, the little Jojo Emperor got a little angry. Sir Jojo had already explained, so why was this fellow still angry? Arbor tugged at his hand forcefully and angrily wanted to throw him away. However, that man held on tightly without any intention of letting go. He even turned around and glared at her with a warning, You're not allowed to throw me away. He exerted some strength and pulled Miss Chiao to his side, securing her in his embrace. The two of them had just entered the door and walked a short distance in front of the corridor when they tugged at each other. There were many people coming and going here, but when they saw His Highness the Crown Prince's angry expression, all of them were like mice that had seen a cat. They were so frightened that they retreated several steps and shrunk their heads. No one dared to go forward and provoke him. Meanwhile, Mu Ruian, who was hiding at the corner of the corridor, was secretly delighted. She was so happy that she couldn't wait to shout out loud. Heavens! His Highness the Crown Prince was finally tired of the Crown Princess? This must be because the little Crown Princess's unlikable personality had angered His Highness. She deserved it. Mu Ruian lowered her head to look at herself and urged the servant girl beside her, help this miss take a look. Is the hairpin on my head crooked? No, Mississippi. Well, looked at her miss in astonishment. She didn't understand why Miss would suddenly ask such a question. Mu Ruian pushed her hand away and took a deep breath. Just as she turned out of the corridor, she wanted to walk towards the young and handsome Crown Prince. She saw the Crown Prince pick up the little Crown Princess with one hand. His face was full of anger as he pressed down on her little face and kissed her hard twice. Mu Ruian was dumbfounded. The smile on her face instantly froze. The servants hiding under the eaves of the corridor lowered their heads, not daring to look around. The young Crown Prince Consort angrily used her sleeve to forcefully wipe her small face as she angrily shouted, "What are you doing? You're not allowed to wipe it." His face was filled with anger as he grabbed her sleeve and forcefully pulled her little hand away. Arbor's eyes widened as he stared at the man who wanted to rebel. He deeply felt that his majesty as a little emperor was being challenged. Stinky Lotus, put me down. With her in his arms, Mo Lien strode towards the Jade Orchid Court. When he passed by Mu Ruian, he didn't even give her a cold glance. His entire body seemed to be covered in frost as he brushed past Mu Ruian. Mu Ruian twisted her handkerchief with both hands, almost tearing it apart. She was so angry that her face turned ashen. "Miss, what's wrong with you?" Bo looked at her miss in confusion. "Let's go." Mu Ruian turned to leave, the anger in her heart continuously rising. The more she walked, the more anxious she became. When she rushed into the Fifth Branch's courtyard, her entire person was shrouded in anger, wishing that she could explode. Chapter 33-29. The young couple naturally didn't know what Mu Ruian was thinking, nor did they have the intention to find out. On this side, Mo Lien was rushing towards Magnolia Pavilion with his wife in his arms. Along the way, everyone who saw him wished for nothing more than to give him a wide berth. Sir Jojo was held in his arms, unable to move her limbs. She was so angry that she raised her head and bit his chin. "If you yell at me again, I'll go back to my parents' home." The Crown Prince felt a little pain from her bite. He didn't need to touch to know that there were a few bite marks on his chin. He lowered his head to look at her and said unhappily, "So this is your parents' home." Arbor was also confused by her anger. She still thought that she had returned to the Eastern Palace. She thought for a moment and pulled her hands out of his arms. She frowned and complained, "Don't think that Sir Jojo doesn't have a temper." Mo Lien reached out to hold her little face, feeling both amused and annoyed. He narrowed his eyes and said with a half-smile, "It's me who spoiled you to this extent. You can charge forward without a care in the world in front of the Heavenly Tao's lightning fire." "It's your own fault," Arbor added. Then she felt that there was something wrong with her words. The two of them looked at each other furiously. They felt that it was a little funny. Mo Lien looked at the little girl who was staring at him with her eyes wide open. For a moment he was anxious and annoyed. His mood couldn't help but fluctuate. Thousands of words turned into a surging kiss, fiercely pressing down on her little mouth. "Why are you so annoying?" He leaned against her lips and murmured, "If this goes on, sooner or later, I'll get sick because of worry, fear, irritation, uneasiness, and all kinds of emotions. You're the annoying one." Arbor grabbed his hair and pulled it hard in her little fist. She shouted angrily, "I already told you, the lightning fire definitely can't do anything to me." "You're annoying. After crushing her lips with his, Mo Lien immediately sensed that this wasn't punishing the little lady, but rather punishing himself. His entire body was about to be set on fire. His eyes were filled with turbulent black waves as he stared fixedly at her. "Do you know how many people were following us just now?" She spat out the words through gritted teeth. "Do you know how many people were following us just now?" Arbor instinctively reached out and wrapped his arms around Lucien's neck. "Someone is eyeing my ability?" After all, being able to help a cultivator at the peak of the spirit realm successfully overcome the tribulation of the 5 spirits was simply too shocking. Mo Lien must have sent someone to deal with those tales. "I don't care if you really have extraordinary strength to resist the might of the heavenly Tao." Mo Lien drew close to her small face, his gaze roving around her face as he remarked dryly, "If I see you risking your life for some irrelevant people again, I'll do it." Arbor widened her eyes slightly and said in exasperation, "You're being unreasonable." "I've never been a reasonable person," Mo Lien said indifferently. "I'm just being reasonable in front of you." Why did he need to be reasonable? He only needed to give an order and people would follow it. If anyone was in danger of losing Jojo, he would make them lose everything. If anyone wanted to consign him to eternal damnation, he would make the first move and end their life right here. "Arbor," he smiled faintly and reached out to stroke her little head gently. "Remember?" Lord Jojo nodded gloomily. Chapter 33:30. She had to appease this fellow's irritable mood first. Otherwise, this fellow might really find someone to kill that unlucky female cultivator. It wasn't easy for her to save that female cultivator, Sister Hao. After going through untold hardships, she passed the tribulation and smoothly ascended to the deity realm. If she was secretly killed by Mo Lien for such a reason, wouldn't it be too unjust? Arbor felt that she shouldn't provoke a man who suddenly lost his mind. She stole a glance at him and pursed her lips. Actually, it wasn't that she couldn't understand Lien's thoughts. He just wouldn't allow her to risk her life for some idle people's business. But in fact, she didn't risk her life. She really wasn't impulsive. She just didn't know why, but Arbor was very confident that the heavenly Tao lightning fire wouldn't dare to attack her. To be honest, she didn't understand where this inexplicable fearlessness came from. "Why aren't you talking?" Arbor threw him the back of her head and put on a, "I'm too lazy to talk to you look." "Talk." Seeing that she obediently agreed to his request, Mo Lien's mood improved a little. As long as this little fellow was obedient and didn't put herself in danger, and didn't make him worried and uneasy, he could do whatever she wanted. He reached out and pinched her little earlobe, and the expression on his face relaxed. Lord Jojo turned his head and glared at him unhappily. "Chirp." He leaned forward and kissed her little face. He grabbed her little hand that was trying to wipe her face with her sleeve and called out helplessly, "Jojo. Don't think that this emperor will forgive your previous rebellion just because you look back at the little Emperor Jojo with an innocent look. I'm scared." He rubbed his forehead against hers and whispered softly, "My heart almost jumped out of my chest just now." At that moment, the panic that was deeply gripped by fear made him feel as if he had sunk into darkness. Only the heavens knew how much strength he used to control himself from going berserk on the spot and slapping that female cultivator to death. If this female practitioner's 5 spirits reincarnation tribulation would threaten Jojo's safety, he would not hesitate to personally deal with this insignificant person. In fact, he had always been such a cold and heartless person. His bottom line was not to hurt his Jojo. Arbor turned his head to look at him, his heart inexplicably softening, but he also felt that this guy had challenged the little emperor's authority before. Moreover, this fellow had used that kind of terrifying gaze to threaten the little emperor. She definitely would not forgive him so easily. He had to make him beg and beg until he forgave him. Mo Lien carelessly nuzzled her head twice. Just as he carried her around the flower path on the side and saw that the magnolia court was right in front of them, they suddenly heard chaotic footsteps coming from the other side of the magnolia court's perimeter wall. "I'm going to kill you!" Suddenly, a loud shout was heard. In an instant, the courtyard was filled with chaos and chaos. Mo Lien stood in place with Arbor in his arms. The couple looked over in confusion, only to see a large group of nannies and maidservants running after the two of them, one in front and one behind, with pale faces. They kept exclaiming, "Young lady, madam, please stop." Arbor saw the madam of the fifth branch, Hua Shi, running in front of them. They had played horse gambling together before, so she naturally had a deep impression of this madam of the fifth branch. After all, she had lost a lot of money to her. Chapter 33-31. Jojo always had a deep impression of the people who gave him money. How could Hua Shi, the wife of the fifth branch, not recognize her? As for the woman with the disheveled hair and ferocious red eyes, she didn't recognize her at all. That woman was slightly younger than Hua Shi. She raised a kitchen knife high in the air and shouted, "I'll kill you," as she chased after Hua Shi. Her expression was slightly terrifying. Xiao Mu reflexively tightened her grip on Emolien's clothes, and her eyes curiously followed the fiendish woman who was swiftly chasing after them. "Miss!" Zhang quickly caught up. She wanted to grab onto her miss several times, but she struggled free every time. Zhang also knew that no matter who it was, they wouldn't be able to calm down. But this matter one was willing to hit while the other was willing to be hit. Her miss could only blame herself for being greedy, for being deceived. "Miss! Oh my, what's going on? What is second young mistress doing?" The clamor in the courtyard attracted more and more female servants to rush over. When they saw the crown prince and the crown princess standing to the side, they didn't dare to act rashly. They hurriedly retreated a dozen steps and hid behind the wall to secretly peek. The crowd in front of them was so noisy that they blocked the road back to Yulan Court. Emolian put down his wife, who was struggling with her small hands and legs. His other hand still held onto her small hand and pulled her to his side. "Jojo, who are they?" After the crown prince calmed down, he saw that his wife wasn't in a good mood. Naturally, he wanted to tease her to talk. It was just a casual question. His thoughts were all on his wife. How could he pay attention to the noisy women in front of him? Arbor was watching the show with curiosity. A group of people in front of him were pushing and shoving to block the woman with the disheveled hair. A few of them shrunk their necks and protected the wife of the fifth branch as they escaped. The little fellow casually replied, "That's the wife of the fifth branch. I've never seen the one with the kitchen knife." After she finished speaking, she realized that she was actually talking to Emolian. She angrily turned her head to the side. The crown prince couldn't help but laugh. He raised his hand to rub the little fellow's furry head and said softly, all right, I apologize. Don't ignore me. It was my bad attitude just now. If there's anything in the future, I'll talk to you nicely." Pumph. Arbor turned to look at him, rolled his eyes, and turned his head back. He reached out and pinched her little face. "You bit me just now. It hurts. If I give you 2 more bites, you can't be angry anymore. Who wants to bite you?" When Xiao Mu recalled that stiff and taut feeling when she bit him just now, her small face instantly darkened. She almost bit her teeth until they broke. Who would be willing to bite him? "Then should I bite you?" Emolian blinked. "Bah, shameless bastard, you still want to bite me?" Arbor turned her head, her little face tense. Emolian couldn't help but smile and rub his face against hers. "Jojo, I've already apologized and begged for mercy. What else do you want?" "Bad person, you're right. It's my fault. I spoiled you." Arbor reached out to pinch his face. "You're not allowed to make trouble for others." "Humph." Emolian glanced at her and said sourly, "Why are you interested in that female cultivator you don't even know?" Arbor tilted her little head and muttered to herself for a few seconds. "She's pleasing to the eye." Chapter 33-32. "Huh, what an excellent reason." Emolian could not help but laugh. He poked the willful little guy's face. "Jojo, if you don't give me a Cold War, I won't go find trouble with others. How's that?" Sir Jojo, who had wanted to nod, glared at him exasperatedly. What was the connection between the two? Why did he have to go find trouble with unimportant people just because she gave him a Cold War? That was simply despicable. Emolian looked at her innocently. He reached out and shook her little body. "Wifey, when I'm scared, my soul will scatter and I'll lose my mind. I'll do things that even I can't predict. You know that, right? Arbor felt her teeth itch. She really wanted to bite him. However, when she thought about how hard it would be, she decided against it. She glanced at him and said, "Are you still going to rebel? Are you still going to yell at me?" Mo Lien secretly twitched his mouth. He did not know whether to laugh or cry as he hugged her and shook his head. "I don't dare. Whatever the little emperor says is right." Arbor reached out and hugged his waist. She put her little face in his arms and rubbed against him. She said in a muffled voice, "I'm sorry." Mo Lien was taken aback, but then he smiled faintly and patted her small head. "Don't worry." Arbor looked up at Mo Lien. She thought for a while and said, "Although I don't know what's going on. But I think that Heavenly Tao should be a little afraid of my master and Uncle Master. Otherwise, back then, when I was in the lower starfield, I had already gained control of the holy water of the 5 spirits. It wouldn't have allowed me to stay in the lower starfield and turn a blind eye to my existence." Mo Lien thought about it carefully. He felt that Jojo's analysis made sense. He could not help but relax a little. He nodded and said, "Okay, but no matter what dangerous things you do in the future, you have to tell me first, okay?" Arbor nodded subconsciously. Then she said unhappily, Before you do something dangerous, will you tell Xiao Xiao? Don't think that Jojo has forgotten. Previously, you and Duan Yu and Rotten Peach Blossom, of course." Mo Lien's survival instincts were so strong that she immediately responded. She then pointed to the front and exclaimed, "Hey, Jojo, look! That madam of the 5th household is being pressed to the ground." Arbor had wanted to take this opportunity to harshly chide him, but when he heard him yell, his gaze involuntarily followed the finger he was pointing at. His attention was diverted by this black-bellied fellow. Looking at the scene, he couldn't help but want to laugh. At this moment, the group of people in front of him was truly in chaos. Everyone was lying on top of each other like a human pyramid, tearing and beating each other. The madam of the 5th branch, Hua Shi, was at the bottom of the crowd. She could only stretch out half of her arm, twitching as if she was struggling. She let out ear-piercing screams. The kitchen knife in the hands of the unfamiliar woman on her back had already been snatched away by the old granny and thrown to the ground. She was currently using her fists to beat the madam of the 5th branch's head and body. Faint streaks of blood floated in her eyes, and she was cursing endlessly. When Mu Qingya came over with Granny Chiu after hearing the news, they saw that the entrance of Yulon Court had already turned into a pot of porridge. Her face darkened, then turned green. Mu Qingya could not help but raise her voice and scold angrily, "Why aren't you stopping? Look at what you've become." "Stop! Stop! Stop!" Granny Chiu yelled angrily. Chapter 33-33. Taking a step forward, Nanny Chiu pointed at the group of servants and shouted at the servants behind her, "What are you all standing there for? Why don't you separate them?" More than a dozen old maids were strong. They quickly stepped forward and picked up the maids who were stacked together. They slapped them twice and threw them to the side. After pulling the messy servants apart, several servants stepped forward to pull the madam of the 5th branch and the 2nd eldest aunt who were hugging and tearing at each other. After tearing the two apart, the two were still cursing each other. With disheveled hair and bloodshot eyes, they kept stretching out their feet to kick each other. Mu Qingya was immediately enraged. She took a few steps forward to Madame Wu and 2nd young madam and slapped each of them hard on the face. "How long are you going to make a fuss? Sister-in-law, why did you hit me? You should hit this bitch." Mu Dongni shouted in exasperation. "Do you know what she did?" Mu Dongni opened her mouth to speak but felt a pain in her cheeks. Her face twisted as she roared, "This bitch cheated me of 1,000,000 spirit coins. 1,000,000 spirit coins. After her husband died, she was no longer single. She only had so little property. She didn't expect that she would be cheated out of it overnight. She even wanted to kill her 5th sister-in-law. What do you mean by 1,000,000 spirit coins?" Mu Qingya was baffled and roared, "Speak properly. Don't you see the crown prince and the crown princess are here? Look at what you've become." Mu Qingya was so angry that her chest heaved up and down. She stared coldly at Mu Dongni and Madame Hua in front of her. Madame Hua's hair was all drooping down. At this time, she didn't look like a beautiful woman at all. Her clothes were torn into a mess by Mu Dongni, and half of her undergarment was exposed. At this time, she felt a slight pain in her scalp. Just now, Mu Dongni had pulled her hair and beaten her so hard that 2 pieces of her scalp were torn off. She thought she was going to die. "Sister-in-law, this bitch cheated me of all my property. Who can I reason with?" Mu Dongni screamed. This second miss, who had lost her husband and stayed at home, had never been someone easy to worry about. Mu Qingya felt a headache coming on when she saw her. She couldn't help but say, "If you don't tell me clearly, how am I supposed to know what's going on between you two? Alright, let's not talk about it here. Let's go to the Golden Garden and figure this out." Mu Dongni said angrily, "No need. Let's make it clear here." She glanced around and finally saw the Crown Prince and the Crown Princess clearly. She hurriedly said, "Since the Crown Prince and the Crown Princess are both here, why don't you be the judge for Auntie?" She took out a crumpled yellow talisman paper from her pocket and held it in her hand as she said to the crowd, Hey, look. Fifth sister-in-law lied to me that it was a golden talisman and asked me to give it to her with all my wealth. You cheated me of all my assets in one night. You guys be my judge. Tell me, is there such a shameless thing in this world? Golden talisman? The little crown princess looked curiously at the talisman paper in Mu Dongni's hand. She could feel that this yellow talisman only looked like a talisman. There was no fluctuation of talisman power on it, so it couldn't be a talisman paper at all. Besides, what the hell was a golden talisman? She had the golden talisman jade tome, which had been passed down for 10,000 years, but she had never heard of such a strange talisman paper. Chapter 33-34. What gold talisman? What's it for? Mu Qingya couldn't help but press her aching head. Tell me clearly. Mu Dongni sat down on the ground, burst into tears, and told Mu Qingya what had happened in the past 3 days. When she said that she was envious of her fifth sister-in-law's success and rushed to give her 1,000,000 spirit coins, she noticed that her sister-in-law looked at her as if she was an idiot. Mu Dongni couldn't help but feel frustrated. She cried, Sister-in-law, I'm not an idiot. Fifth sister-in-law is too good at deceiving people. She's so good at acting. I don't care, sister-in-law. You're the head of the family. You must help me. I only have this little savings in my life. I can't let fifth sister-in-law cheat me out of it. I don't ask for much, and I don't want any interest. Just let her return the principal to me. Mu Qingya stared at Mu Dongni for a long time as if she was a fool. She couldn't help but spit at her in her heart. Wasn't he an idiot? What? Are you still thinking that you can get your hands on the doubled interest? You know that she's lying to you. You'll be lucky if you can get the principal back, okay? You were greedy for riches and honor, but in the end, it was all for naught. Who can you blame? Mu Dongni had been paying attention to Mu Qingya's expression. Seeing that she was silent, she couldn't help but panic. She hurriedly cried, Sister-in-law, you have to help me, sister-in-law. Shut up. Mu Qingya yelled at her in exasperation. She really didn't want to get involved in this mess, but in the current situation, if she didn't intervene, she didn't know if the two of them would continue to cause trouble and eventually bring the matter to old Madam. Mu Qingya sighed and turned to look at Madame Hua. Fifth sister-in-law, is it really as second aunt said? Madame Hua's face twisted slightly and she hurriedly defended herself. Of course not, sister-in-law. How could I lie to her? The gold talisman did give me spirit coins many times before. But how would I know that the gold talisman would lose its effect last night? Hundreds of thousands of spirit coins were taken from me, sister-in-law. Eldest sister-in-law. The fifth madam wailed, Do you think I don't feel bad? Do you think I'm willing? I also want to earn money, but I don't know what's wrong with this golden talisman. It's probably because I've used it too many times that it lost its effect. In the end, I swallowed all of second sister's spirit coins and my own spirit coins. Ask second sister. After we buried the spirit coins yesterday, I didn't go there. Until just now, he went to find second younger sister to work together with him. Was its second younger sister? The two of us dug out the stone box together. So many people are really looking at it. My heart is bleeding and aching now that the item has been swallowed by the golden talisman. You liar. You must have done something. Otherwise, how could there be such a coincidence? Oh, the first day I buried it, I got 1,000,000 spirit coins. You said a word of bullshit and it's gone. Mu Dongni lost her mind again and wanted to pounce on Madame Hua and beat her up. Everyone hurriedly pulled her back. Mu Qingya also shouted angrily, "Where did you bury it?" Madame Hua's pupils constricted slightly. This subtle expression fell into Mu Qingya's eyes. Her face became even more unsightly. Mu Dongni hurriedly got up from the ground. "Sister-in-law, I'll take you there." Chapter 33-35. As witnesses, the Crown Prince and the little Crown Princess were also invited by Mu Qingya. Although Prince Emo had no interest in the affairs of the backyard, his little wife loved to join in the fun. Looking at her sparkling eyes and her curious look, the Crown Prince felt a little amused. He simply agreed to Mu Qingya's request and brought his wife over to continue watching the fun. The group of people followed Mu Dongni to the place where the gold was buried. Mu Qingya waved her hand and said to the group of servants behind her, "Dig! Dig up the bottom of the tree." Hua, whose face was bruised and swollen, hurriedly stepped forward and grinned. "Sister-in-law, why are we digging up the tree? This old willow tree is decades old. If we dig up the tree for our business, it will ruin the Mu family's feng shui. That's hard to say." Mu Dongni was not a fool. Hearing Hua Shi's evasive tone, she immediately understood what was going on. She hurriedly shouted, "What are you waiting for? Dig it up." The servants swung their arms forward and smashed the tree fiercely. Near noon, the old master and old madam's north courtyard was occupied by Mu Dongni's cries. "Mother, you have to uphold justice for your daughter. Fifth sister-in-law cheated your daughter of the spirit coins that I painstakingly accumulated for so many years and left me with nothing. I really can't live anymore. I can't live anymore." Zhan Ju hurriedly pulled her back, crying to the heavens, Miss, don't take it too hard." Old Madam's face was dark, and she felt that her head was about to explode from the noise of Mu Dongni and the others. This time, only the little Crown Princess came to Old Madam's courtyard to watch the fun. The Crown Prince didn't follow. Seeing Old Madam's bad expression, she squeezed forward and sat beside her. She took out a medicine bottle from her inner world and shook it under Old Madam's nose. Old Madam took a breath and immediately felt much better, and her head didn't hurt as much as before. The old lady patted her little hand and nodded happily at her. Then she turned to look at Mu Dongni, who was lying on the ground and bawling. Speechless, she roared, "Shut up! What are you crying for? You still have the face to cry? You're from a talisman aristocratic family, but you're ignorant and incompetent. You can't even tell if that talisman has talisman power or not. You were deceived, so you can only say that you deserved it." Mu Dongni looked at the old lady in disbelief. Wiping her tears, she cried, "Mother, how can you say that about me? It's not like you don't know that ever since I was young, I couldn't even draw a beginner-grade safety talisman properly. Sister-in-law saw this in me, that's why she lied to me." The old lady was so angry that she was amused. "You were ignorant and incompetent since you were young, yet you still think you're right?" Mu Dongni wiped her tears and sobbed, "Mother, sister-in-law did it on purpose." Sister-in-law dug up the old willow tree and found a secret passage that led to the small garden behind the fifth courtyard. "That's how my fifth sister-in-law stole my 1,000,000 spirit coins without anyone noticing. No wonder she sent 2 people to watch under the willow tree, but they didn't see any movement. It turned out that under the willow tree, under the mud and stones, had long been dug out." "Is this your first day living in the house?" Old Madam scolded. "There are so many big and small secret passages in the house. Don't you have any idea?" Chapter 33-36. Which noble house like theirs didn't have a few secret passages? The secret passage under the willow tree wasn't dug by Madame Hua. It already existed, okay? What a fool. Old Madame Hua looked at Mu Dongni with an ugly expression, then turned to Madame Hua and gave her a sharp look. Madame Hua. Madame Hua's heart skipped a beat. She hurriedly prostrated herself on the ground and wailed, kowtowing repeatedly. Your daughter-in-law deserves to die. I regret deceiving second aunt. Mother, please forgive me. Mother, please forgive me. Now that the matter had been exposed and the secret passage had been discovered, it would be unreasonable to deny it now. Madame Hua hurriedly admitted it, but her resentment toward Mu Qingya rose a lot. This madam of the first branch was too meddlesome. If she hadn't ordered the tree to be dug, the secret passage wouldn't have been exposed. As long as she insisted that it was the golden talisman that embezzled second aunt's money, no one could do anything to her. Now that the matter had reached old Madame Hua, she could only honestly admit her mistake and ask for forgiveness to seek a glimmer of hope for herself. Old Madame Hua slapped the armrest and shouted coldly, "Where's the money? Return the money to Dongni, copy the family rules 100 times, and be grounded for 7 days. Then this matter will be over." In fact, this punishment wasn't too excessive, and it could be considered as giving Madame Hua face. But Madame Hua's face turned green and white. She pursed her lips for a long time but couldn't spit out a word. "You bitch, didn't you hear what mother said? Give me back the money." Mu Dongni stepped forward on her knees, slapped Madame Hua's arm, and scolded her. Old Madame Hua glared fiercely at Mu Dongni. "Shut up. Kneel properly." Mu Dongni pursed her lips and reluctantly closed her mouth, shrinking her head as she knelt to the side. "Madam of the fifth branch, do you have any difficulties? Speak." Old Madame Hua's eyes were sharp. When she saw Madame Hua's timid appearance, she knew that the money was probably no longer in Madame Hua's hands. The money was spent." "What?" Mu Dongni almost spat on the fifth madam's face. "Did you just spend all of my 1 million spirit coins just like that?" Mu Dongni screamed and wailed. She slapped Hua's arm and shrieked, "I wasn't even willing to spend my husband's money, and now it's all given to a slut like you. Give it back to me. I'm still not returning it to you. Give it back, give it back." Mu Dongni punched Hua Shi's face again and again. The two of them had long been beaten black and blue. Everyone couldn't bear to look at them. The old lady was so angry that she threw a cup at him. With a clang, Mu Dongni and Madame Hua both jumped in fright and subconsciously shrank back. "Still not telling the truth?" the old lady shouted angrily. Hua Shi hurriedly lowered her head to the ground and cried out in a trembling voice, "Mother, daughter-in-law knows she was wrong. Mother, please calm down, mother, please calm down. I will definitely return the money to second sister in 2 days." "Why 2 days?" Mu Dongni looked suspicious. She patted Hua Shi's arm and shouted at old Madame Hua, "Mother, don't believe her. She has to return it now, right away. Who knows if she gave all the money to her lover?" Madame Hua shouted angrily, "Second sister, don't talk nonsense." Chapter 33-37. You're the gigolo in the theater. Don't think everyone is like you. Aya, you swindled people's money and dug a tunnel to transfer people's property. How dare you accuse me? Mu Dongni raised her hand and glared at Madame Hua, wanting to hit her again. "Drag them away." Old Madame Hua scolded. 2 middle-aged women with round waists and thick arms quickly stepped forward and pulled Madame Hua and Mu Dongni apart from each other, forcing them to kneel on both sides. "Mother, you have to uphold justice for me." Madame Hua scolded Mu Dongni as soon as she started to cry. "Slap her 3 times. Mother, why did you hit me?" Mu Dongni looked at Madame Hua dumbfoundedly and cried out indignantly, "I'm the victim." Slap. "Second miss, don't say anything." Mu Qingya wanted to roll her eyes at her second sister's IQ. "You know Madame Hua is angry, but you pretend to be pitiful and kneel on the side without saying anything. Madame Hua will uphold justice for you. What's the use of making a fuss? With this brain, it's no wonder Madame Hua cheated all her property." Tell me clearly where the money went," Madame Hua demanded coldly. Madame Hua looked up at Madame Hua hesitantly and bit her lip. I lent the money to someone for 2 days. Just 2 days. I'll return it in 2 days. What? Mu Dongni's face was red and swollen as she said incredulously, You actually lent my money? You're a person who doesn't get up early if there's no profit. It must be profit. How much profit? Tell me. Tell me. Now that she was pulled to the side of the room by the women, there was a long distance between her and Madame Hua. Even if she kicked and punched, she couldn't reach Madame Hua, who was huddled on the side. She could only yell at her. It's Steward Lee from the Pink House. You're going to piss me off. You actually made a deal with such a lowly person? Madame Hua pounded the table in anger. Go. Tell Mu Jingyang to get his ass over here. This old woman wants to ask him how he manages his wife. Hua Shi jumped in fright and hurriedly scurried forward on her knees with a sullen face. She cried, Old madam, please don't call husband over. Master doesn't know about this either. Arbor patted the matriarch's back and helped her breathe. He raised his head and looked at Hua Shi curiously. Pink House. She seemed to have heard of it somewhere before, but she couldn't quite remember where. The little fellow was curious and couldn't help but look at Mu Dongni a few more times. Mu Dongni's face was swollen like a pig's head, which made her look a little funny. She should be her second aunt. Why did she look so poor? As a member of the Mu clan, a member of a talisman aristocratic family, logically speaking, their horizons should be very broad. Why do I feel like she wants to tear the roof off just because of a mere 1 million spirit coins? In fact, the nouveau riche had no concept of spirit coins. To her, spirit coins were just a constantly increasing number. The little girl was now only interested in some strange medicinal herbs. Other than that, even if she saw spirit tools, her heart wouldn't waver. Old madam, please don't call husband over. Hua Shi cried and wailed, I was greedy. I cheated second miss of her money. Chapter 33-38. Elderly lady, believe me this once. I will definitely be able to get the money back in 2 days. That manager Lee promised me that he will return all 10 million spirit coins to me at that time. He won't miss out on a single cent with interest. You still believe that manager Lee? Elderly lady was about to cry from Hua Nei's stupidity. Her finger trembled as she pointed at her and scolded, You actually lent 10 million spirit coins to that person? You're asking him to help you release the stamp money, isn't that right? The moment old madam finished speaking, everyone's expression changed. Don't lie to this old woman. Although this old woman doesn't care about matters, I have heard of this stamp money before. Do you know that the Imperial Court issued a written regulation a year ago? It's forbidden to release stamp money among the people. Those people only dare to do it secretly. They were originally worried about not having enough funds, but they didn't expect that an idiot like you would hold a large wad of spirit coins and rush to deliver them money. Grandmother, don't be too angry. When the little stoic saw elderly lady's flushed complexion, it was clear that she was extremely agitated, so she handed her a cup of warm tea. Arbor said dryly, As long as that person hasn't run away from the capital, we'll find him and beat him up. We'll just make him spit out the money. Hua Nei shuddered. She felt that the little girl's eyes were penetrating with chilliness when she spoke, as if she was extremely accustomed to doing this kind of thing. At this time, Mu Jingyang's voice came from outside the door. Mu Jingyang's temper was irascible to begin with, so when he was called over and learned that such a shameless thing had happened, he didn't hesitate at all. As soon as he came in, he kicked Hua Nei's back without another word. Look at what you've done. Mu Jingyang shouted angrily. After being kicked, Hua Nei fell to the ground and wailed miserably, Lord, you can't blame me entirely for this matter. If it weren't for the fact that I lost so many spirit coins to the crown princess a few days ago, I wouldn't have dared to offend her. This concubine also wouldn't have set her sights on second sister. We only paid the deposit for the Jade Buddha hand that we bought from Jade Stone Shop, so we still need to pay the remaining 1 million spirit coins. Mu Jingyang's face flushed red. The little crown princess couldn't help but interject, Don't talk nonsense. You guys were the ones who dragged me, the crown princess, into the fight. Madam of the first branch can also bear witness to this matter. The corners of Mu Qingya's mouth twitched. She nodded and said, Indeed. Fifth sister-in-law, it was you who proposed to play Ma Diao. At that time, Crown Princess only said that she knew a little about it. Hua Shi was speechless. Recalling that she was indeed the one who had suggested to invite the little Crown Princess to play Ma Diao together, her heart was filled with anger. She hated herself for being so stupid to have thought of such an idea at that time. Xiao Mu gazed at her coldly. Fortunately, there were many people present at the time. Otherwise, wouldn't this Crown Prince Consort have been wrongly accused by you, this fellow? Mu Jingyang was burning with rage. He wanted nothing more than to kick Hua Nei again. This stupid woman was so stupid that he wanted to cry. There were many people present. With this woman's words, everyone now knew that the fifth branch couldn't afford to buy a gift for the old master and actually had to swindle money from second eldest aunt to pay the balance. Wasn't this the Mu family's biggest joke this year? Mu Jingyang's face alternated between green and red, and the veins on his temples throbbed. Right now, he wanted to kill this group of women. Old Madam coldly said, "I'll leave this matter to you guys to handle." Chapter 33-39. Returns second young Mrs. Money within 3 days. Mu Jingyang felt that he had lost all face. How would he dare to argue with his mother? He hurriedly nodded and agreed. Hua Shi, stay in your courtyard for the next 2 days and reflect on your mistakes. There's no need for you to come out. Old Madam said coldly. Hua Shi nearly collapsed to the ground. She hurriedly cried, "Mother, if you want to punish me, can't you wait until after Old Master's birthday banquet?" Tomorrow was Old Master's birthday banquet. When the guests arrived, there would be too many people and gossip. If people were to ask around and find out that she, the fifth madam, was actually grounded in her own courtyard by the old madam, then who knew how much gossip would float out about her in the future? You still dare to bargain with mother? Mu Jingyang chided. He dragged her up from the ground and said angrily, "Come back with me." Today, he had practically lost all his face in the sea of forgetfulness. With such a scandal, how could he raise his head in front of his brothers in the future? Husband. Hua Shi sobbed and looked at Mu Qingya for help. Sister-in-law, help me say a few words. Mu Qingya looked as if she couldn't bear it. She turned to Old Madam and said, "Fifth sister-in-law only had a momentary change of heart. She was most likely tricked by someone. Mother, why don't you let her attend tomorrow's birthday banquet and show her filial piety to Old Master?" Old Madam sneered. What filial piety? She was just competing with others. However, for such a scandal, it was fine to punish her behind closed doors. If word of it got out, she would become the laughingstock of all the aristocratic families. Old Madam felt that she couldn't afford to lose this face. Thus, she said coldly, "Since Qingya is pleading for mercy for you, then punish her tomorrow." Hua Shi heaved a sigh of relief and hurriedly bowed in thanks. Then, she was dragged out by an angry Mu Jingyang. Mu Qingya said, "Pink House actually dared to target our Mu family. Mother, I think it's time to teach them a lesson." The old madam's face was also cold as she nodded slightly. No matter what, tomorrow is the old master's birthday banquet. Everything will be postponed. After the old master's birthday, we will slowly settle accounts with them. Mu Qingya bowed and respectfully left the old madam's courtyard. Mu Qingya had been quite busy recently because she had to host old Master Sheng's birthday banquet. Arbor chatted with the old madam for a while longer before leaving as well. Tomorrow's birthday banquet would be held at noon. Most of the work that needed to be done had already been done in the past 2 days. All that was left was some loose ends. After Arbor returned to Yulan Court, he ran into the side room and saw Emo Lien writing a letter at the table. She scampered to his side and reached out to hug his waist. Lien, that pink building, what kind of place is it? Why do I feel like I've heard you mention it before?" Emo Lien was at the end of his letter when she interrupted him. One of the words in the letter was slightly crooked. He threw down the pen and reached out to pull her to him. He looked at her in amusement. "When did I mention it to you?" "I didn't." The little fellow blinked curiously. "You didn't?" Madam of the fifth branch cheated second aunt of her money. She lent it to Pink House to let her deposit money. "Lien, is the interest rate of deposit money very high?" Mo Lien frowned. Chapter 3340. Stamp money isn't a good thing. Who knows how many families have been ruined by it since ancient times. Mo Lien hugged her and sat her to the side. The imperial court banned this from the start of the year. It turns out that there are still people doing this in the dark. Arbor perked up when she heard this. She snuggled into his arms and said, "Then let's go to the capital's government and report this pink house for illegal activities. Let Stubborn Chow investigate. When the time comes, we'll drag that manager Li out and make him spit out everything he took." Mo Lien couldn't help but laugh. He looked down at her. "You just want to beat him up, don't you?" Arbor looked at him expressionlessly. She turned her head away and muttered softly, "So that Madame Hua won't tell everyone she sees that the only reason she went to release stamp money was because she lost to me in horse gambling and had no money to spend." She actually said that. Mo Lien creased his brows. With a wave of his hand, Yi appeared before them with a whoosh. "Your Highness, what are your orders?" Yi asked with a grin. "Make a trip to the 5th branch's garden and pass on my message to Mu Jingyang. If I hear his wife spouting nonsense and slandering the crown princess again, I'll pull out her tongue." Ao, Yi immediately left. Arbor glanced at him and wiggled her head in his arms. "I won't argue with them. The 5th branch's wife is also a funny person. She clearly has a lot of money. She lent 10 million spirit coins to that pink house, but she didn't have money to pay for old Ye's gift." Mo Lien's lips curled. "So it's not your problem. It's her own illness." Arbor didn't comment. She poked her head out of his arms and blinked her eyes. "It's going to be lively tomorrow." Mo Lien reached out and tapped her nose. "Everyone's in the preliminaries now. When do you plan to go over?" "Big brother is drawing talismans for me." The little fellow pursed her lips. Mo Lien couldn't help but laugh. "Then shouldn't you go over as well?" "Of course, but it's still early." Arbor wasn't bragging. With her talisman crafting speed, even if it was the last 2 hours, she would still be able to defeat everyone present. "Then when do you plan to go?" Mo Lien couldn't help but laugh. "After dinner." The little fellow tilted her head and thought, "I'll draw it for an hour after dinner, then I'll come back to sleep. When the time comes, I'll see how many the person with the most can draw. I'll draw the same number as her." Arbor really wanted to find someone to test the talisman on. She really wanted to know, with the same number of talismans and the same number of talismans, how much stronger would her talismans be compared to their peers. Prince Mo couldn't help but laugh. He nodded and said, "Then I'll accompany you." "No need." The little fellow crawled in his arms and reached out to touch his face. "If I go, I'll distract a lot of people. It's better if I don't go." Mo Lien couldn't help but laugh inwardly. His wifey was indirectly praising him for his beauty. His wifey thought that if such a handsome person like him went over, he would definitely attract a lot of attention. It would make people stop drawing talismans and look at him. Xiao Mu looked at him strangely. Why did she feel like her husband's expression contained a bit of smugness in his spurious smile? He must be proud of Sir Jojo, the little fellow thought. That's right. Sir Jojo's talisman crafting could be said to be the best in the world. Chapter 3341. Bang, bang, bang. Firecrackers and firecrackers resounded. Today, the Mu family's doors were wide open, and honored guests were brought to the male and female guest areas by cheerful servants. According to tradition, the birthday banquet was held at noon. Before that, Mu Jingfeng led a group of brothers to receive the guests in the front courtyard. Madame Mu accompanied the old madam to welcome the womenfolk in the rear courtyard. The family competition could begin at the beginning of the birthday banquet and end before the evening banquet. Those who had nothing better to do and wanted to stay to watch could return home after watching the competition and eating the banquet. It could be said that this was an annual event for the Mu family. Among them, there were many patrician families who quite liked the banquet held by the Mu family. Not only could they test the family's knowledge of the younger generation, they could also watch the exciting competition. This kind of banquet was very popular among cultivators in recent years. Many patrician families followed the Mu family's example and began to hold birthday banquets like this in recent years. They invited many sects and patrician families to give each other pointers while celebrating the birthday. Eldest Miss Mu is here. In the rear garden, among a group of women surrounded by pearls and jade, someone called out. Everyone's gaze turned to the woman who slowly walked over. This woman wore a pure white strapless dress with yellow gauze covering it. Her hair was simply tied into a young girl's bun, and a jasper hairpin was threaded through her hair. She had a leisurely smile as she walked over. She had almond-shaped eyes and rosy cheeks, and her entire body exuded a calm and dignified aura. Greetings, eldest Miss Mu. All the women came forward to greet her with smiles. Greetings, young Mrs. Mu Rochuan nodded indifferently. Hee hee. A clear and melodious laughter came from not far away. In the small flower pavilion, there were 3 young girls sitting there. The one in the middle had a slightly pale complexion. She was the 4th branch's young lady, Mu Ro Chin, with a frail body. Next to her were 2 other women who each had their own merits. These 2 were from the Mu family's branch families. The one on the left was called Mu Yuan Yuan, and the one on the right was Mu Lixiang. The one who laughed brightly was Mu Lixiang. At this moment, she was looking at Mu Rochuan with interest. With a strange smile, she said, "Oh, eldest young miss is here." Mu Lixiang smiled and smoothed the hair on her temples. With a mischievous expression, she said, "I heard that the Crown Princess also participated in the preliminaries yesterday. Moreover, she drew 60 talismans in just an hour. Many of them are talismans that we have never seen before." Eldest young miss fainted on the spot. Mu Rochuan's face darkened at once. Thinking of yesterday's incident, she felt her chest fill with a trace of anger, and her whole person was a little flustered. Mu Lixiang looked at Mu Roxian's expression and became certain. I wonder if this is true or false, or if someone made it up. She didn't have the qualifications to participate in the competition, and she didn't want to help others stand out, so she didn't go to watch the excitement of the preliminaries yesterday. However, one of her sisters went to join in the fun. When she came back, she mentioned this matter to her. She treated it as a joke and laughed incessantly. I heard that our crown princess drew 60 peerless purple talismans in one go. Heavens, it's simply godly. Not even an hour has passed since she finished drawing, and the crown princess has already returned? Everyone was in an uproar. They didn't dare to believe it. Although they weren't talisman masters, they had heard of talismans from their elders. Naturally, they knew what a peerless purple talisman was. The crown princess has arrived. Chapter 33-42. At this time, there were many noble ladies sitting or standing in the garden. When they heard the sound, they all subconsciously stood up and stretched their necks to look over. With this look, they saw a person walking over from the garden's small path. She wore a very simple crimson robe, but with a discerning eye, one could tell that it was embroidered by Ni Chang Market. The rosy cloud brocade material flowed all the way over, and the skirt didn't get caught in the slightest when it brushed past the grass and trees. Instead, it was as smooth as the clouds in the sky. When the little crown princess came over, she was expressionless as usual. There was only a purple glazed hairpin on her head, which shone brightly under the sunlight. She was too beautiful. All the ladies present couldn't help but sigh in their hearts. She was clearly wearing very simple clothes and jewelry, unlike some of the ladies present, who hated that they couldn't hang their entire family's belongings on their body like a peddler's pole. But it was such a bright and beautiful person that just one look was enough to make people fall for her. No wonder His Highness the Crown Prince was so fond of her. Greetings to the Crown Princess. The group of ladies bowed in unison, and each of them had an obedient appearance. They all seemed to have the aptitude of a noble lady. But no one knew what they were thinking in their hearts. Arbor glanced over and saw many familiar faces. She only nodded slightly and said, "No need to be so courteous." The ladies inwardly sighed in relief. Many of them had participated in the palace banquet back then. Most of them had experienced the Crown Princess' anger towards Madame Gua, as well as the Crown Princess releasing a mechanical puppet and violently beating up Long Chong. They were very clear about the temperament of this little Crown Princess, and it really wasn't that great. It was the first time that he had so smoothly and gently dispensed with their etiquette like today. It was probably because she was in a good mood today that she didn't scold them. Arbor didn't know what the ladies were thinking. She walked into the small flower pavilion and exchanged glances with Mu Ro-chin, who had stood up to welcome her. Crown Princess. The fourth branch's Mu Rocken smiled warmly at her, and a trace of extraordinary splendor appeared in her eyes. Yesterday, you really only went to draw for an hour, and you drew 60 peerless purple talismans in succession? Mu Rochuan stood at the side. Her entire body seemed to be emitting a black aura. She seemed to be in a very bad state. Who would have thought that this day would come so soon? The attention of everyone in the family was taken away by this outsider. They would only sigh at her youth and how powerful her talisman techniques were. They would only praise this woman in the future and would no longer have her, the eldest daughter of the Mu family, in their eyes. Mu Rochuan's fingers curled tightly together. Across the crowd, she looked coldly at Arbor, who was surrounded by people. Her emotions were almost out of control. She forcefully suppressed the urge to go forward and give her a vicious punch. She turned her head with difficulty and then quickly walked away. Mu Lixiang, who had been paying attention to her movements, couldn't help but chuckle. Eldest miss, why are you leaving so quickly? We haven't even chatted for long. At the side, Mu Yuanyuan couldn't help but tug at her, using her eyes to signal for her to stop talking. Mu Lixiang snorted. Although she was unconvinced, she didn't refute Mu Yuanyuan. Crown Princess, we all admire your talisman drawing skills. If you have the time, Yuanyuan would like to ask the Crown Princess for a few pointers. Forgive my rudeness, but I am Mu Yuanyuan from the cadet branch. You might not know me yet. Chapter 33-43. The young Crown Prince Consort nodded slightly, which could be considered a small response. Mu Yuanyuan couldn't help but feel a little excited when she saw that Ji Yunshu was actually paying attention to her. She really wanted to ask the Crown Prince Consort for advice, so she tried her best to appear as humble as possible in front of the young Crown Prince Consort. Mu Yuanyuan was a smart child. She knew very well that the Crown Princess talisman crafting skills were definitely above their collective level. No, it could even be said that she was miles ahead of them. If she could receive a few pointers from the Crown Princess, she, Mu Yuanyuan, would definitely benefit from it for the rest of her life. Arbor merely glanced at Mu Yuanyuan before turning to size up Mu Rocken. She suddenly asked, "Do you often suffer from insomnia and can't sleep at night?" Mu Rocken was startled, but she quickly nodded and said, "That's right. Crown Princess, how did you know?" Arbor stretched out her hand. "Give me your hand." Mu Rocken subconsciously rolled up her sleeve and offered her wrist to Ji Yunshu. Arbor took her pulse and frowned slightly. "This is a chronic illness that you carried when you were in the womb." She pulled Mu Rocken into the small flower pavilion and had her sit down. "You usually carry your medicine pouch with you, right?" Mu Rocken's personal maidservant hastily interjected, "Crown Princess, you're truly godly. How did you know?" "Naturally, it's because the Crown Princess's medical skills are exceptional." Mu Rocken smiled and patted the maidservant's hand. She turned to the young Crown Princess and said, "Crown Princess, is there any medicine that can save Rocken's body?" She couldn't help but smile bitterly as she spoke. In the past few years, she really did live up to the young Crown Princess's words. She carried her medicine pouch with her all the time and never stopped taking it. If the young Crown Princess could really cure her chronic illness, then she would truly be Mu Rocken's savior. It's not difficult to treat. It's just that the treatment cycle is a bit troublesome. There are also a lot of things to pay attention to. Arbor said, "Come to my court tomorrow and I'll tell you in detail." Mu Rocken's eyes lit up. She nodded repeatedly and softly replied, "Okay." Madame Zhongli and young Madame Zhongli have arrived. The atmosphere froze for a moment. These young ladies from aristocratic families were naturally well informed. They had long since known that the second miss of the Zhongli clan seemed to have died in the Sun-Moon mystery realm. According to the young master of the Gu clan, this matter seemed to be closely related to the Crown Princess. Also, the madam of the Chen family seemed to have gone to the New South Garden to cause trouble with the Crown Princess, and she ended up in a pretty bad state. Madame Ma of Zhongli's residence had lost her beloved daughter. How could she let the matter rest? It was said that she had already made trouble with Great General Zhongli twice, but to no avail. Today was she directly taking advantage of Old Master Mu's birthday banquet to kill her way into the Mu residence to cause trouble for the young crown princess? Mu Rakan naturally knew about this matter. She approached the young crown princess and whispered, "Crown princess, it seems like the people from the Zhongli clan are here with ill intentions." Arbor frowned slightly and said indifferently, "Who cares if they're here with ill intentions? If they want to cause trouble for me, then let them come in vertically and leave horizontally." Mu Lixiang exchanged a look with Mu Yuan in astonishment. She inwardly analyzed this stoic-faced crown princess's personality traits. Both of them wanted to befriend the crown princess, so they wanted to grasp the crown princess's temperament in a short period of time. They wanted to avoid minefields and do their best to display their friendly side. Chapter 33-44. However, from the looks of it, the crown princess was more willing to chat with Mu Rochin, who was a direct descendant. This was probably the difference between a direct descendant and a concubine. Mu Yuan's expression flickered, and she helped Mu Rochin up. "Rochin, let's go welcome Madame Zhongli." After all, the crown princess could disregard the Zhongli family's madam and young madam, but they couldn't. Other than the young crown princess, all the girls stood up in unison and bowed respectfully. Madame Zhongli was dressed in a bright red brocade robe today, and her hair was adorned with an 8-treasure golden tassel buyao. The eldest young madam, Madame Ne Luo, had a dazzling smile, and her gorgeous robes made her look very ordinary. The two of them came hand in hand, beaming from ear to ear. They returned greetings to the noble ladies who came up to greet them, and one couldn't tell at all that they were here to challenge them. However, the appearance of the great general's wife at Old Master Mu's birthday banquet was a very thought-provoking matter in itself. After all, this was a gathering of the noble families. Why did a madam of an official's family come to join in the fun? While they were pondering, Madame Zhongli walked over with a smile with her daughter-in-law. When she saw that stoic face, her eyes flickered, and she did her best to control her emotions that were about to explode. The mother-in-law and daughter-in-law both appeared very dignified and magnanimous as they bowed to Arbor with very polite expressions. Arbor nodded indifferently and retracted his gaze after sizing up Madame Zhongli. A cold glint flitted through Madame Ne Ma's eyes when she saw that the young crown princess's expression was so indifferent and had no intention of speaking to her. Today is Old Master Mu's birthday banquet, so this madam also came to join in the fun, Madame Ne Ma said with a smile. She looked around and patted the back of her daughter-in-law Madame Ne Luo's hand. "You young people should chat together for a while. When I came over earlier, I saw Madame Gu and Madame Meng. I'll go over and chat with them." The mother. The eldest young madam nodded gently and secretly exchanged a look with Madame Ne Ma. Madame Ne Ma left with a smile. Arbor unexpectedly looked up and gazed at her back before lowering his eyes to hide the mockery in them. He clearly hated her to the point of gnashing his teeth, yet he still pretended to be so gentle and amiable. The little stoic secretly thought it was a bit funny. Zhongli Jiwei kept courting death in the secret territory, and in the end, she accidentally killed herself. If the Zhongli family wanted to vent their anger on others, they would have to see if she, Arbor, was someone who could be easily vented their anger on. Madame Luo sat down in front of Arbor and the others with a smile. She seemed to be in a good mood and said with a smile, "Ladies, how long have you been sitting here? Hee, there are still more than 2 hours before the birthday banquet begins. Don't you guys feel a little bored?" A young lady on the left said with a smile, "Does eldest young madam have any good suggestions? We've all been sitting here for quite a while. Just now, when I came over from the front yard, I saw many young masters from aristocratic families crowding there to compete in archery. Why don't we go over and watch from afar? It's better than sitting around." Mu Rochin smiled with a troubled expression and said softly, "That's not very appropriate, right? It'll seem a bit frivolous." Madame Ne Luo's expression stiffened, and then she covered her mouth with her hand and giggled. Fifth young lady really is a well-bred young lady who doesn't step out of the house. What era is it now? Where are there so many rules and regulations? Chapter 33:45. Besides, isn't there an opera house in the garden? What's wrong with us going to the opera house to watch them compete from afar? We're all children of aristocratic families, so we're far more forthright and generous than those daughters of officials. Why would we be so restrained? Oh, are the young masters competing in front of the elegant pleasure house? There was indeed a large empty space in front of the elegant pleasure house. If the young masters were bored, they could set up a target to compete in archery. Madame Luo nodded with a smile. That's the place. The group of young ladies in the garden had long been tempted by Madame Luo's words, so they quickly nodded and said, "Fifth young lady, why don't we go over? It's too boring to be idle for more than 2 hours. Let's go to the opera house and take a look. It's so far away, what could possibly happen?" Sure. Everyone agreed in unison. It was unknown what they were thinking, but they all revealed yearning expressions on their faces. Madame Luo covered her mouth with a handkerchief and snickered inwardly. They're all young ladies who are eager for love. Crown Princess, what do you think? Mu Rakan turned to ask the young Crown Princess. Not interested. The young Crown Princess's words were like a bucket of cold water that poured over everyone's heads. The excited chatter of the young ladies suddenly disappeared. Not to mention Madame Luo, who forcefully rolled her eyes, even Mu Lixiang and Mu Yuanyuan, who wholeheartedly wanted to curry favor with the young Crown Princess and befriend her, couldn't help but feel that they didn't want to continue conversing with this person. The young Crown Princess frowned. She clearly felt that the surrounding atmosphere had turned from warm to cold. How baffling. These women were always like this. They didn't want to talk to her after she spoke a little. If they didn't want to talk, then so be it. She didn't want to waste her breath with them. Mu Rakan coughed lightly and said, "Since the Crown Princess isn't interested, then you all can go. I'm also not that interested, so I'll accompany the Crown Princess and continue chatting here." Everyone immediately looked at each other. The eldest miss of the first branch of the Mu family had left in a fit of anger. Only the fifth young lady, who was born of the first wife, was the host here. If the host did not make a move, how could they, the guests, have the nerve to make a fuss and directly run to someone else's theater? Madame Luo's eyes flashed and she suddenly laughed. "Fifth young lady, you must be joking. As the host, if you don't go, these little girls naturally don't dare to go." She turned to look at the young Crown Princess and said cheerfully, "Although the Crown Princess isn't in the mood, why don't you come with us to take a look? Who knows, maybe we'll see something interesting." What's so interesting about a bunch of idiots shooting arrows at a target? The little Crown Princess said expressionlessly. "Everyone, what's going on? Why do I want to chase this guy away?" Madame Luo felt her teeth itch from anger. She wanted to pounce on this little girl and bite off a piece of her flesh. Why were her words so infuriating? If the main character didn't go, the matter couldn't proceed. Madame Luo twisted the handkerchief in her hand and couldn't help but persuade, "When I arrived, I saw His Highness also there." Arbor smiled faintly and turned to look at her, sizing her up from head to toe. "You really want me to go? Don't regret it, Madame Luo shuddered for no reason. She only felt that the Crown Princess's clear eyes were like ice beads, piercing one's bone marrow and inexplicably making one feel a chill that penetrated one's heart. Why did it inexplicably feel a bit scary? Chapter 33:46. She swallowed her saliva and hurriedly nodded. "Crown Princess, you really know how to joke. What do I have to regret?" She had invited her to watch the archery competition time and time again, and she still dared to say that she wouldn't cause any trouble? Did she really think that she, Arbor, was a fool? The young Crown Princess stood up with a frosty expression and looked meaningfully at Madame Luo. "Then go." She flung her crimson sleeves and took the lead to walk out of the small flower pavilion. Under the sunlight, everyone felt that the young Crown Princess's fluttering red makeup was extremely dazzling and eye-catching. The group of womenfolk majestically walked towards the elegant pleasure house in the front courtyard. From afar, they could hear the rowdy cheers of a group of men. The young maidens' faces were flushed red as they hurriedly walked forward. Mu Lixiang reflexively glanced at the young Crown Princess and couldn't help but twitch her mouth. The crown princess's stoic face and frosty expression made her look like she was going to kill someone with a sword. She didn't look like she was going to meet the young masters of the aristocratic families. Why did she feel that it was a bit strange and she wanted to laugh? Arbor naturally didn't know what the others were thinking as she was surrounded by a group of women. When she arrived at the entrance of the elegant pleasure house, she glanced sideways. There wasn't even a shadow of her husband. She just knew that her husband wouldn't be so bored as to come watch a group of idiots shoot arrows. The young maiden's expression instantly darkened. She turned to berate Madame Luo. "How dare you, Madame Luo, deceive this crown princess?" Madame Luo was instantly dumbfounded. They had just arrived at the elegant pleasure house and hadn't had time to make a move, but the young crown princess had already made a move. Madame Luo's heart was in a mess. She couldn't help but secretly speculate. Could it be that the crown princess had already seen through her scheme? How could the young crown princess be so smart? Madame Luo hurriedly knelt down as if she was putting on an act. "Crown princess, please forgive me." "Big liar, you dare to lie to me and say that His Highness is here? Do you know what happened to the person who deceived this crown princess last time?" The little crown princess looked coldly at Madame Luo. "Kneel here for me. Don't get up." Madame Luo, what was going on? How did things change so quickly that she was caught off guard? It's my family's little stoic." A light chuckle sounded from behind, and a mocking voice said, "What's going on? Are you teaching someone a lesson again?" Luo Shi's kneeling was just an act. She expected that the crown princess would make her stand up in front of everyone. After all, this wasn't a big deal. If it were an ordinary person, they wouldn't be so calculative with her. Who would have thought that the little crown princess was such a whimsical and eccentric person? She actually wanted her to kneel in front of the elegance restaurant and forbade her from moving? Was there any justice left in this world? No matter what, Luo Shi was still the eldest young madam of Zhongli Manor. When had she ever suffered such humiliation? Arbor looked back and rolled his eyes. Qin Xian, this guy, was standing not far behind her while holding a fan and blinking at her. He was wearing a long black robe and gently fanning himself. "Do your eyes hurt?" the little stoic asked expressionlessly. A chuckle was heard from the side. It was Qin Jio. This guy couldn't help but want to laugh. No matter how he looked at it, his big brother was throwing flirtatious glances at Miss Qiao in all sorts of ways. Who would have thought that this girl would actually say that his eyes hurt? It wasn't that Qin Xian's eyes hurt, it was that his head hurt. He glanced at Arbor, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Chapter 3347. Long time no see, Jojo. I missed you so much. Arbor glanced at him, but for the first time, he didn't retort. Do you have time to chat? Qin Xian asked with a smile. What do you want? What do you want? Without waiting for the little stoic to reply, a coarse voice cut in and shouted rudely, "The person who suggested the archery competition just now was the Gu family's lad, right? What? Are you seizing the opportunity to slip away now? You people of the Divine Province truly don't treat your guests well. How can you abandon your guests and run off to talk to a bunch of women?" Disdain flashed through eldest young Sir Qin's eyes, and he turned to look at the burly man striding over. "This is Prince Zulu of the barbarian tribe. Ladies, in order to avoid offending you, please go upstairs first." The group of young ladies naturally blushed as they looked at the graceful eldest young Sir Qin, and their hearts swayed. When they turned to look at the barbarian prince who was striding over, the girls hastily shrunk back and turned to leave in unison. "Hey, wait." Prince Zulu of the barbarian tribe laughed with his hands on his hips. "Since these little ladies have come, then let's compete together? Our barbarian tribe's women can hold up half the sky at the very top. Could it be that your women of the Divine Province are all little flowers in a greenhouse that can't be touched or looked at?" Following Prince Zulu's gesture, two slender women with exposed bellies waved the bows in their hands symbolically with a smug look on their faces. A faint smile flashed through the eyes of Madame Ne Luo, who was kneeling on the ground, and she secretly lowered her head. "They're here." Qin Xian turned to look at Prince Zulu with a grin. "Are you really blind or pretending to be blind?" The daughters of the patrician families of the divine province aren't interested in competing with a barbarian like you. Alright, you still don't think it's enough that you have the Gu family's brothers to compete with you? Prince Zulu humphed. Are your women of the divine province this cowardly? These words were rather impolite, so the noble ladies of the patrician families naturally faced him with anger. Mu Rakan's expression also immediately darkened. Those who come are guests. As the host, I naturally have to entertain them well. But if the guest oversteps the bounds as the host, I have a reason to ask him to leave. Prince Zulu's face darkened as he stared at the sickly girl in front of him. She looked small, and her face was not very outstanding, but when she stood there and criticized him, she still had a bit of an imposing manner. This little girl is quite shrewish. Prince Zulu smiled darkly. I've taken a fancy to you. I'll make you my 33rd concubine. Everyone was dumbfounded. Mu Ro was so angry that her entire body was trembling. Her hands were tightly clenched together. Bullshit. A mere barbarian dares to covet our miss. Go hide where it's cool. The servant girl beside Mu Ro Chin was also a shrewish person. She didn't say anything else and immediately scolded her. Who do you think you are? Let your family's elders talk to this prince. I'll give you 10 level 10 spirit tools in exchange for this little girl. Prince Zulu shouted arrogantly. Mu Ro Chin wrung her hands. She was so angry that her face was ashen, and her heart was thumping uncontrollably. Princess Arbor glanced at Mu Ro Chin and lightly patted the back of her hand. She didn't know why, but Mu Ro Chin felt that the young crown princess's gentle pat had calmed her down quite a bit. Where are the crown princess' personal guards? Chapter 33-48. Eldest young Madame Ne Luo, who was kneeling on the ground, felt her eyelids twitch. She suddenly felt that the young crown princess's words were too familiar, right? Present. Following the little stoic's shout, a dozen or so phantom-like shadows rushed over with a whoosh and appeared behind the young crown princess with a swish. Eldest young Sir Chin twitched his mouth inexplicably, suddenly at a loss for words. He glanced at Prince Zulu sympathetically, feeling that this guy's following fate would be very tragic. The more arrogant he was now, the more miserable he would be later. From his experience, he inferred that basically every guy who clashed head-on with the little stoic wouldn't have a good ending. Prince Zulu frowned as he looked at the little stoic. Then he sized her up and cracked a smile. What? Could it be that this little wife wants to volunteer to become this prince's 34th beloved concubine? Before he could finish speaking, a purple forest guard swung a slap at his face. Prince Zulu was a person with some skills and wasn't completely an idiot. Seeing the purple forest guard slap, the man retreated a few steps and punched out, colliding with the purple forest guard slap. Subsequently, his expression shifted slightly, and he retreated several steps. Prince! Prince! A dozen or so burly barbarian tribesmen surrounded him furiously. Those two beautiful concubines with their bellies exposed also dashed forward in a panic and shrieked, "What are you doing? How can you be so rude to the prince?" Prince. One of the beautiful concubines turned to glare in Arbor's direction and said indignantly, "Who are you? How dare you lay a vicious hand on the prince? Do you know who he is? He is so long-winded." Arbor shouted impatiently and waved his hand. "Throw them all out." Several purple forest guards strode forward and picked up the barbarian tribesmen one by one, striding outside. Although Prince Zulu had dodged the first attack, there were still 2 or 3 purple forest guards attacking him at the same time. How could he possibly be a match for them? In just a few moves, the purple forest guard had completely subdued him. At this moment, Prince Zulu was being carried by a purple forest guard. His face was flushed red as he roared, "Is this how you treat your guests? In the future, when you go out, don't brag to others that the Chinese are hospitable." Hospitable my ass. Arbor coldly looked at the barbarian and suddenly raised his hand. Wait a minute. The purple forest guards secretly glanced at the prince and silently mourned for him in their hearts. Why did she have to provoke the young crown prince consort instead of letting them drag her out? What, 34 concubines. Prince Zulu smirked at the young crown princess. Now you finally know to be afraid? Let me tell you, Zulu, slap. Before this fellow could finish speaking, he was stunned by the scorching pain on his face. Prince Zulu's eyes instantly turned incomparably red and emitted traces of fiery light. He glared furiously at the little stoic standing in front of him with a ferule in her hand and roared furiously, You little girl, you actually dare to hit me? Slap. From the looks of it, hitting someone with a ferule was very painful. After 2 slaps, 3 of Zulu's teeth fell out, and even the left side of his face became red and swollen. This fellow's hands were held behind his back and he couldn't move. He could only twist his body in an attempt to break free as he bellowed furiously. Chapter 33:49. The young crown princess stared coldly at the barbarian who spoke without thinking. The ferule landed on the man's face again and again, hurting Prince Zulu so much that tears, snot, and everything else flowed down. The 2 beautiful concubines were dumbstruck, and they screamed repeatedly, Stop hitting! Stop hitting! Stop hitting! I beg you to be merciful, don't hit. Some of the onlookers, especially those who were more familiar with the young crown princess's methods, couldn't help but look at him with, I feel sorry for you. Of all people to provoke, he just had to provoke the young crown princess's bottom line time and time again. Now that he was beaten up violently. Heh, it served him right. Although the barbarian tribe wasn't small, could it compete with China with everything it had? Since it couldn't, standing on China's soil, he didn't know how to behave with his tail between his legs. How dare he be so arrogant? Wasn't he trying to provoke disdain? At first, Prince Zulu was furious. He glared viciously at the young crown princess, wishing that he could pounce on her and bite her neck off. However, after 10, 20, 50, and 100 strikes, he didn't even have the strength to glare at her with venomous hatred. The most abominable thing was that the defensive shield around his head, which he used all his strength to protect himself, had long been shattered by the young crown princess' repeated strikes. No one could understand Prince Zulu's current agony. He felt that this was the worst torture in the world. The 2 beautiful concubines' hearts ached as they watched. They hurriedly knelt on the ground and begged bitterly, Miss, please be merciful. Don't hit our prince anymore. The prince was only joking with you before. You're so noble and beautiful, how could you give yourself to someone as a concubine? The 2 beautiful concubines finally came to their senses. They saw that everyone present was coldly watching the prince get beaten up, and none of them extended a helping hand. It was evident that the identity of this young lady with a stoic face who made the move was definitely not ordinary. Young Madame Zhongli, who was kneeling in front of the elegant music house, looked at the scene in front of her. Her eyes flashed and her body trembled subconsciously. The little crown princess acted too quickly. She didn't give anyone a chance to react at all. She killed the troublemaker in an instant. Who knew where she got such a way of doing things from? Filthy words can't even withstand a single blow. The little stoic looked down from above at Prince Zulu, who was kneeling on the ground with an almost unrecognizable face. She coldly shouted, Guards! This person offended the crown princess in public and provoked her time and time again. His actions are detestable and his crimes are punishable by death. Pass down my orders, drag him out and execute him. The 2 Violet Forest guards immediately stepped forward and dragged the pig-like prince along the ground, forcibly dragging him out of the courtyard. Prince Zulu suddenly felt a little desperate. His eyes couldn't help but shrink as he shouted angrily, Are you all dead? Hurry up and save this prince. Hurry! Quick! Prince Zulu's buttocks bounced over a piece of gravel. The pain was unbearable and he couldn't help but cry out. The dozen or so brawny men that Prince Zulu brought with him were also extremely anxious. However, the strongest among them was merely a level 12 great spiritual cultivator. They were completely unable to resist being suppressed by the 3 Violet Forest guards and could only look on helplessly as their prince was dragged out. You can't do this. Chapter 33:50. The prince is our great king's most beloved son. If you harm even a strand of his hair, the great king definitely won't let you off. One of the barbarian tribesmen couldn't help but shout. Everyone silently glanced at the extremely wretched Prince Zulu and couldn't help but observe a moment of silence for him again. Right now, your prince didn't just suffer a strand of hair injury. His entire body, including his hair, was injured from head to toe. Who can stop this crown princess from killing someone she wants to kill? The little crown princess looked coldly at the barbarian tribesman who was hooting and kicked him through the air, sending him tumbling backward and sprawling on the ground with a plop. Who gave you the guts to dare speak to me like this? A whip sparkling with electricity suddenly appeared in Arbor's hand. With a slight flick of her wrist, a force swept out and rushed towards the dozen barbarian tribesmen opposite her with a whoosh. Crack! Sparks flew in all directions as the whip landed on several people's bodies, sweeping them away. At the same time, the whip spun in the air and emitted a row of crackling electricity. The little stoic waved the long whip in her hand as she looked at the barbarian tribesmen and said coldly, "Submit or die. Choose yourselves." The few barbarian tribesmen were startled, and at the same time, their bodies shrunk back. "If you're not speaking, then die together with your prince." "Ah, if you kill our prince, then the great king, Pucci." The whip carrying electricity swept across that person's stomach, sending him flying heavily and landing limply on the ground like a puddle of mud. Only then did the barbarian tribesmen feel fear. At first, they didn't think that this woman from the divine continent would be so heavy-handed. Now that they saw someone die, they realized that this woman from the divine continent wasn't joking with them, nor was she threatening them. If they didn't submit, they really would die. "I submit, I submit." The first person immediately crawled over and knelt at Arbor's feet, wailing in a tearful voice, I'm willing to submit. Honorable Miss, we failed to recognize the pearl and offended you. Please forgive us." Prince Zulu was so angry that he almost fainted. He managed to yell, You dare to betray me." However, at this moment, in order to save their own lives, the barbarian tribesmen no longer cared about a broken prince who had almost lost his life. Moreover, as long as one person surrendered first, it would be much easier for the others to surrender. Moreover, in their opinion, there was nothing shameful about surrendering to the strong. They couldn't beat him in the first place, so why should they continue to pretend to be strong? Xiao Mu swept them a disdainful glance, and her gaze swept over their fawning faces. Afterwards, she turned to that Prince Zulu, whose eyes were about to burst, and said coldly, "It goes without saying who exactly is the coward." A faint smile appeared in Mu Rochin's eyes. She didn't know why, but when she saw the little crown princess beat up that bastard, she felt a trace of satisfaction in her heart. Perhaps the little crown princess herself didn't know, but when she was unrestrained and even a little domineering, she was so dazzling that people couldn't look away. Cough, cough, cough. Zulu suddenly laughed wildly. Chapter 3351. You're at death's door, yet you still dare to be so insolent. Be careful or you'll die of laughter. The young maidservant beside Mu Rochin glared hatefully at Prince Zulu. Zulu roared angrily, "You people from the divine continent are all hypocrites like this. You knew you were about to lose, so you forcefully dragged this prince out." His gaze landed on Guishuan, and his eyes turned. Zulu roared angrily, "You brat, this woman is the reinforcements you called over, right? You knew you were about to lose, so you used this method to escape. Simply shameful." Guishuan's face flushed red, and he subconsciously clenched his fists. "What nonsense are you spouting? How could the young crown princess be the reinforcements he, Guishuan, called over? Don't joke around. Not to mention that it was still unknown who would emerge victorious in the competition between him and this pig-headed prince. Even if he knew he was about to lose, he couldn't have called for reinforcements like the stoic face. There was still enmity between the two of them. Was this Prince Zulu beaten up by the young crown princess and had his head blown off? His words were a complete mess and simply illogical. Arbor gazed icily at the barbarian who hooted and said icily, "Stalling for time is useless." At this moment, There was true silence in front of the elegant pleasure house. One could hear a pin drop. Even Prince Zulu, who was yelling at the top of his lungs, was hit by the young crown princess's icy words. He instantly shut up, as if he had fallen into an ice cellar. I thought that since you dared to provoke me, you naturally had the courage to bear the consequences of this provocation. Arbor's gaze swept over Prince Zulu, who was being dragged to the ground. However, I seem to have misjudged your courage. You're executing me like this? I won't accept it. Prince Zulu shouted harshly. His shoulders were forcefully pressed down, and he couldn't budge at all. You think I'll continue to waste words with you? Arbor glanced at him coldly, and his gaze swept over to Madame Luo, who was kneeling on the side with her head lowered. A calm glance swept over, and Madame Luo was immediately dragged forward. She jumped in fright and couldn't help but cry out in alarm, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" Tie him up. Xiao Mu waved her hand slightly, and 2 purple forest guards immediately dragged the shrieking Madame Luo over and tied her to the target rack. Madame Luo's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. She opened her mouth wide and shouted in shock, Crown Princess, what are you doing? How can you treat me like this without asking for the reason?" Madame Luo almost asked, "Do you still want your reputation? You are the Crown Princess of the Divine Land. Is it really okay for you to be so cruel?" The noble ladies who were watching the commotion in front of the elegant lounge were also shocked by this scene. Arbor's cold gaze shifted to her face, and he said expressionlessly, "Still not willing to speak? You must be the one who called this idiot prince over. The Zhongli estate is secretly colluding with the barbarian tribes. They're up to no good." The little crown princess said coldly, "Everyone has the right to punish them." Madame Luo's eyes narrowed and she shrieked, "Crown Princess, you can eat whatever you want, but you can't speak nonsense like this. What evidence do you have to say this? Are you trying to frame the Zhongli family in public?" "Evidence?" Arbor sneered and glanced back at the 2 purple forest guards. "In the Divine Land, is there any punishment that can make people confess?" Chapter 3352. I heard that Royal Father has a barrel of bliss that seems to be quite fun. Why don't you lend it to this crown princess so that the prince can play with it? If Madame Luo hadn't been tied up, she would have collapsed to the ground long ago. At this moment, she felt unprecedented regret and fear. She had only heard people say that the young crown princess wasn't to be trifled with, but it wasn't until she dared to provoke her that she finally understood how those unlucky fellows felt. She regretted it. She regretted that she had been pressured by her mother-in-law and accepted today's mission. Unexpectedly, Prince Zulu had just started his provocation and was beaten down by the crown princess with lightning speed. His current sorry state was truly frightening. Replying to the crown princess, the common punishment is flogging. A purple forest guard cupped his fists and said, "If you want to escalate the punishment, you can start with cutting off fingers, chopping off hands, or chopping off feet. See which one the crown princess likes?" Eldest young Sir Chin couldn't help but twitch his mouth. This purple forest guard was rather interesting. Freaking, see which one the crown princess likes? Did they think this was cooking? The young crown princess swept a glance at the sweating Prince Zulu. "Then let's start with cutting off fingers." Prince Zulu paled and shouted angrily, "What are you doing? Are you trying to beat me into a confession?" The young crown princess shook her head expressionlessly. "I only want to beat you into confessing, not beat you into a confession." Prince Zulu still wanted to spout nonsense, but the purple forest guard didn't waste time with him. He directly took out a small bamboo board about the width of a palm. On it was a slender nail that emitted a frightening cold light under the sunlight. Before the purple forest guard's hand could fall, Prince Zulu's face was covered in cold sweat as he shrieked. He spoke rapidly, "I want to compete with you in archery. If you win, I'll tell you everything. If you lose, you have to let this prince go. Otherwise, I won't say anything even if you beat me to death. Then you can go die." This idiot was rather persistent in competing with archery. It looked like he was rather confident in his archery skills. "Send someone to guard the Mu family's garden. If anyone dares to trespass, kill them." Arbor coldly issued an order. Immediately, dozens of figures flew out from the shadows and rushed out of the garden. Cold sweat dripped down the foreheads of the barbarian tribesmen. They finally realized that it was completely unwise to be unreasonable with this little girl in a place like the Divine Province. Who knew how many hidden guards were hiding around the little stoic? Arbor turned to look at Kuru, who was sweating profusely. Your men can't get in. We're just wasting each other's time. She glanced at the pitiful creature indifferently. Fine, it's still early. I'll fulfill your dying wish. This crown princess can compete with you in archery, but the rules will be according to my rules. A moment later, Prince Zulu's shoulder was finally released. Rubbing his aching arm, Zulu moved his arm slightly. When his gaze shifted forward, his pupils involuntarily contracted. The target had already been moved to the garden's entrance. There was a full 800 meters between the Elegance restaurant's entrance and the target. A black cloth covered Prince Zulu's eyes. He could only spread out his spiritual conscience to sense Madame Luo, who was 800 meters away and clattering her teeth. At this moment, Madame Luo was truly regretting her actions. She was tied to the target frame, and a lush green apple was placed on her head. Chapter 3353. The rule of the competition was that Prince Zulu had to hit one of the wings of the butterfly on the little green apple to win the competition. That's right, it was this strict. This was the competition rules set by the wondrous Crown Prince Consort. Madame Luo forced herself to stay awake. If she wasn't tied up, she would have collapsed into a pile of mud. Prince Zulu was fighting for his life, and she was also fighting for her life. But she felt that both of their lives were going to end here today. There was no chance of winning, okay? Why aren't you shooting? Arbor scolded impatiently. She hated dilly-dallying the most. If you want to shoot an arrow, then shoot it. Didn't you insist on it? Now you're acting like a coward, your hand trembling while holding the arrow. What do you mean by this? I've already given you a chance, what are you waiting for? Arbor couldn't help but scold him when he saw him trembling while holding the arrow. He didn't look like he was going to shoot at all. Not like a man. Trembling all over the place, you coward. Prince Zulu clenched his teeth. He didn't know if it was because of fear or shock, but he couldn't sense Madame Luo's presence from 800 meters away, much less the apple on her head or the butterfly on it. Wasn't this a trap? Prince Zulu couldn't help but take a deep breath. With a flick of his finger, an arrow flew out, piercing through the air. With a momentum that could pierce through the sun and moon, it shot towards Madame Luo, who was about to explode. Ah! Madame Luo couldn't help but let out a blood-curdling scream. She watched as the arrow pierced through her cheek. The sharp aura of the arrowhead scraped past her powdery face. Instantly, a burning pain spread to her heart. Her face was hurt? Her face was hurt. Madame Luo's eyes widened in horror. There were hundreds of people gathered on the field, but not a single sound was heard. Many noble ladies' hearts were still thumping wildly at this time. They all received a signal at the same time. The young Crown Prince Consort was an extremely dangerous person. If they didn't want to die on the spot, it was best not to provoke the ruthless Crown Princess. This is impossible. Prince Zulu yanked off the black cloth in front of his eyes in a rage out of humiliation. He turned around and aimed the bow in his hand at Xiao Mu, who was just inches away from him. He yelled madly, "Damn woman, go die first." So, an arrow flew in from outside the courtyard and hit Prince Zulu's right wrist where he was knocking the arrow. Bulu was caught off guard and his wrist was broken. He screamed and the arrow fell to the ground with a bang. Arbor didn't even change his position from the beginning to the end. He was still standing in the same place, staring coldly at Kuru, who was paralyzed on the ground. If it wasn't for the commotion at the elegant lounge, the Crown Prince would still be accompanying the old master and chatting with the other family heads. Now that he had accompanied the old man here, he just happened to see a fool shooting an arrow at his wife. He must be tired of living. What's impossible? Prince Mo's eyes were cold as he looked at Bulu's group. The Violet Forest Guard immediately came forward and whispered a few words into his ear, finishing the story in a few words. Emo Lien's eyes became even colder. He turned to Bulu and said, "Impossible?" He stretched out his leg and kicked the bow that Kanlu had dropped on the ground into his hand. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.